You're lying in bed trying to fall asleep when a memory shows up. It's not welcome, so you tell yourself to stop thinking about it. But the more you try to block it out, the louder it gets. It loops through your head. Sleep moves farther away. What's happening is a common pattern. The more you try to control a thought, the more it takes hold. This is the paradox of control. Efforts to push thoughts or emotions away can make them stronger. This shows up in everyday moments. Someone in a work meeting feels nervous. They try to stay calm by telling themselves to relax. They repeat affirmations, but now they're anxious about being anxious. They notice their heart racing and feel pressure to hide it. That pressure builds. Instead of calming down, they feel more out of control. The need to fix the feeling only feeds it. The same thing can happen with anger. A person feels it rising and tells themselves they shouldn't feel that way. They bottle it up. They act polite, even cheerful, but inside the tension builds. The anger doesn't disappear. It leaks out later in a sharp comment or a cold silence. Suppressing emotion often creates a second problem: emotional overflow at the wrong time or in the wrong way. Control backfires because it forces the mind to focus on what we want to avoid. Telling yourself not to be afraid means you're monitoring fear. Trying not to think of a past mistake keeps that mistake active in your awareness. The brain doesn't let go just because you want it to. In fact, it often interprets your effort to control as a sign that something is wrong, which increases the alertness and stress you're trying to avoid. Take someone dealing with grief. They push the sadness away by staying busy. They fill their days with tasks and noise. But when things slow down, a quiet walk, a long drive, a moment alone, the sadness reappears. It's not gone. It's been waiting. Unfelt emotions don't dissolve, they linger. When we try to outpace them, they follow. Intrusive thoughts follow the same pattern. A person might experience a recurring doubt or image they don't want. They try to distract themselves or argue with it. But each attempt gives the thought more energy. It becomes more frequent, more persistent. The brain takes it as important and worth revisiting. What started as a passing thought becomes a mental loop. Trying to control emotions or thoughts often comes from a good place. People want to feel better. They want to stay steady. But control as a strategy is fragile. It relies on constant effort. It creates resistance, and resistance turns discomfort into distress. A person with a fear of flying might try to manage their panic by taking deep breaths and repeating calming phrases. But if the fear still comes, they feel they've failed. That failure adds a new layer: fear of fear. Now it's not just the flight that's hard, it's the effort to avoid panic that fuels it. A different approach begins with noticing, not fixing. Letting emotions and thoughts show up without needing to change them creates space. That space gives the nervous system room to settle. You can still feel discomfort, but you don't have to react to it. Instead of pushing away nervousness in a meeting, a person might acknowledge it. There's anxiety right now. No fight, no shame, just a fact. Then they shift their attention to what they're doing: listening, speaking, staying present. The feeling may stay, but it doesn't control the outcome. The same goes for the thought that won't stop at bedtime. Instead of repeating, "Don't think about it," the person might say, "That thought is back." They let it be one part of the mental noise, not the center. Maybe they turn their attention to the feel of the blanket or the rhythm of their breath, not to drown out the thought, but to soften its grip. This practice is not about surrendering to chaos. It's about shifting from struggle to awareness. Control says, force it to go away. Awareness says, notice it's here. This small change can lead to big results. Thoughts lose power when they're not fought. Emotions move more freely when they're not resisted. Top athletes talk about flow, a state of focus where they stop overthinking and trust their training. That's not control. That's presence. Control would have them micromanaging each move. Presence allows for instinct and responsiveness. In therapy, this shows up in acceptance-based methods, like ACT acceptance and commitment therapy. The idea is not to control the mind, but to work with it, not to erase thoughts, but to let them pass through. You learn to respond instead of react. Think of someone preparing to speak in public. Their hands shake, their voice feels tight. If they fight that, the pressure increases. If they say to themselves, "It's okay to feel nervous," and continue anyway, the feeling might fade, or it might stay. Either way, they're not trapped by it. Or a person who's lost someone close. Instead of trying to stay strong all the time, they let themselves cry when it comes. They let the grief rise and fall. That openness doesn't weaken them. It makes room for healing. Emotions are like weather. You can't stop the rain by telling it to go away, but you can notice it, prepare for it, and move through it. The same applies to internal experiences. You can't prevent every unwanted thought or feeling, but you can learn not to fight them. You can let them be part of your day without letting them run your life. The paradox of control is real. The more tightly you try to grip your inner world, the more tangled it becomes. Letting go of that grip, even a little, can shift how you experience everything. You move from a place of resistance to one of readiness, and that changes how much space you have to think, to feel, and to act. You walk into a store to buy toothpaste. There are over 20 kinds on the shelf. Some promise whiter teeth, others fight plaque, a few have charcoal, and some are made for sensitive gums. You just want clean teeth, but now you're standing there comparing ingredients, reading claims, wondering if the cheaper one will do, or if the expensive one is actually better. What should be a simple choice turns into a small source of stress. This is the paradox of choice. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to make a decision, and the less satisfied you feel afterward. This problem doesn't stop at the store. It happens in restaurants, on streaming services, in dating apps, in online shopping. You might want to watch a movie, so you scroll for 30 minutes and end up watching nothing. You want to find someone to date, so you swipe through profiles until they all blur together. You think having more choices means you'll find something perfect, but instead, you get stuck. You hesitate, you second guess. When people face too many options, they often feel overwhelmed. Instead of freeing us, choice can paralyze us. That's decision fatigue. Each choice takes mental energy. With enough options, the brain starts to slow down. You lose focus, you put things off, or you make a choice just to be done with it, then wonder if you picked the right thing. Take the example of buying jeans. A store used to offer 3 fits: slim, regular, and relaxed. Now there are dozens: skinny, athletic, straight, tapered, bootcut, high-rise, low-rise, stretch, raw denim. You spend an hour trying them on. You finally buy a pair, but instead of feeling good, you feel uncertain. Maybe another style would have looked better. Maybe you missed something. Instead of being happy with your purchase, you carry regret. Regret is one of the key effects of too much choice. When there are only a few options, you make your pick and move on. When there are many, you feel responsible for the outcome. If the result isn't perfect, you blame yourself. You think, "I could have chosen better." That responsibility becomes a weight. It turns what could be a minor disappointment into a source of self-doubt. This happens in more serious areas too. College students choosing majors, professionals picking a career path, parents choosing a school for their children, all face a growing menu of options. They gather advice, research rankings, compare outcomes, but the more they dig, the more uncertain they feel. The pressure to choose right grows with each possibility. Some end up stuck in indecision. Others commit, but worry they've chosen the wrong path. Even after the choice is made, the mind tends to revisit it. That's called rumination. You replay the decision in your head, imagining different outcomes. What if you'd chosen the other job, the other city, the other person? Each new possibility becomes a ghost version of your life, one you'll never know, but can't stop thinking about. These imagined lives often look better in hindsight because the mind edits them to highlight only what's missing from your current situation. This constant reevaluation wears you down. it also chips away at satisfaction. In psychology, this effect is known as choice overload. When people are given too many options, they're less likely to feel good about the one they picked. Even when they choose well, they wonder if something better was available. Satisfaction drops not because the result is bad, but because the process was exhausting and full of doubt. Now look at the rise of personalization. Many platforms and services promise to tailor options to your tastes. That sounds helpful, but it often adds more layers of decision-making. A streaming service recommends 5 categories based on your history. You open one, and it shows hundreds of titles. You still have to scroll. You still feel pressure to pick something good. The filter changed, but the overload stayed. In dating, this issue can show up in the form of endless profiles. A person swipes through hundreds of options, believing the right one is just one more swipe away. They go on a date, but instead of focusing on the person in front of them, they think about all the people they didn't choose. That sense of having too many possibilities makes it harder to commit, not easier. It makes it harder to feel sure, even when someone good is right there. The same dynamic plays out with careers. A person might look at job boards with thousands of listings. They might follow dozens of professionals on social media, each sharing a different path. Instead of feeling inspired, they feel lost. If success can look like anything, how do you know what to aim for? The freedom of choice turns into a burden of expectation. You're not just choosing a job, you're choosing an identity. And with every choice comes the fear of missing out on what another path might have given you. Sometimes, limiting choices can be a relief. A person might go to a small restaurant with only 5 items on the menu. They pick one and enjoy the meal, no stress, no second guessing. Or a clothing store with fewer options might help you find what you want faster, with more confidence. Fewer options don't always mean fewer outcomes. They just reduce the friction that comes with deciding. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about recognizing the mental cost of too much freedom. Freedom without limits can create confusion. Boundaries can actually support clearer thinking and stronger decisions. Parents often set limits for children, not to restrict them, but to help them focus. A child offered 2 toys will likely pick one and enjoy it. A child offered 20 may sit in frustration or pick something only to want the next thing minutes later. The lesson applies to adults too. We think we want more options, but we often do better with fewer. Some people create routines to reduce decision fatigue. They wear the same kind of outfit each day. They eat similar meals. They follow a set schedule. This frees up energy for more important choices. Instead of using up mental energy on small decisions, they save it for moments that really matter. Other people use default rules. For example, they always buy the same brand unless there's a clear reason to change. Or they limit research to 30 minutes and then make a decision. These rules protect them from getting stuck in endless comparison. They add structure where the world offers none. When choices are limited, the brain works differently. You focus on what's in front of you. You accept trade-offs. You settle in. When choices are unlimited, the brain can become restless. You chase what you don't have. You imagine perfection and feel let down by reality. The paradox of choice isn't that choices are bad. It's that the abundance of options doesn't always lead to better outcomes. It often leads to hesitation, regret, and dissatisfaction. What seems like freedom can feel like pressure, and what's meant to help can end up holding you back. You're told not to think of a pink elephant. That's the instruction. Simple enough. But the image shows up in your mind anyway. You might try to block it, push it aside, focus on something else. Still, it returns. The harder you try to avoid it, the more clearly you see it. That's not a failure of focus. It's how the mind works. This is what ironic process theory explains. When you try not to think about something, you end up thinking about it more. The theory comes from psychologist Daniel Wegner. He studied what happens when people try to suppress thoughts. He found that suppression often backfires. The brain works against itself. It tries to push the unwanted thought away, but in doing so, keeps checking to make sure the thought is gone. That checking process brings the thought back into awareness. You end up in a loop. Take someone trying to quit smoking. They tell themselves, "Don't think about cigarettes." But now they're thinking about not thinking about cigarettes. Each time they remind themselves to stop, they're reinforcing the thought they want to avoid. Their attention stays on the craving instead of moving away from it. It works the same way with emotions. A person might try to stop feeling anxious before a big presentation. They say, "Don't be nervous, stay calm." But now they're watching themselves closely for signs of nervousness: heart rate, dry mouth, shaking hands. That self-monitoring raises their anxiety. It's not that they're doing something wrong. Their mind is trying to help, but the effort works against them. This process happens in two parts. The first is the conscious effort. You actively try to direct your mind away from the unwanted thought. You focus elsewhere. You distract yourself. That's the part you're aware of. The second part is automatic. In the background, your brain keeps scanning for the thought, checking if it's under control. But this background scan keeps the idea active. It keeps the door open. Think of someone going through a breakup. They keep telling themselves not to think about their ex. They avoid places they used to go, skip songs they used to listen to, and distract themselves with new hobbies. But even while doing all that, the ex stays in their head. The effort to forget keeps the memory alive. Or take someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder. A common symptom is the urge to stop unwanted thoughts. A person might fear germs and try not to think about contamination. But the fear grows, not because the germs are real, but because the mind keeps checking. Am I thinking about it? Is the fear coming back? That loop feeds the obsession. The ironic effect isn't just a personal struggle. It shows up in social situations. Say someone is trying not to laugh during a serious moment. The more they suppress the laughter, the harder it gets to hold it in. Or a person tries not to blush during a speech. They feel heat rise in their face, then panic that it's happening. The fear of the reaction becomes the cause of it. Sleep offers another clear example. A person lies awake at night, trying to fall asleep. They say, "Stop thinking, just relax." But now they're thinking about relaxing. They check whether their mind is clear. They try to slow their breathing, but they're too focused on doing it right. Minutes pass, then hours. Sleep stays just out of reach. The effort to fall asleep keeps the mind alert. It's about willpower. It's about how thought suppression works under pressure. The conscious mind gives the order, but the unconscious mind doesn't follow it in the way we hope. Instead, it keeps monitoring. It treats the unwanted thought like a threat and refuses to let it go unattended. Sports psychology deals with this a lot. A golfer tells themselves not to miss the putt. Don't hit it too hard. That image of hitting it too hard now becomes the dominant one. They try to control their stroke, but the warning keeps flashing in their mind. Athletes are often coached to focus on what they want to do, not what they want to avoid. That shift helps the brain stop triggering the ironic process. One way this theory affects daily life is through worry. A person might try not to think about a health problem or a mistake at work. They tell themselves it's not worth worrying over. But in trying to avoid the thought, they rehearse it over and over. Even if they distract themselves, the worry creeps back in. It's like holding a beach ball underwater. The pressure builds, and eventually it pops up again. Another place this shows up is in dieting. Someone decides not to eat sugar. They say, no cookies, no cake, no sweets. Sugar is on their mind. They go to a party and scan the table, not for what they can eat, but for what they can't. The effort to avoid something draws attention to it. That makes self-control harder, not easier. Mental health strategies often address this directly. Therapies like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy encourage noticing thoughts without trying to change or suppress them. Instead of saying, "Don't think that," you say, "That thought is here." You don't react. You let it come and go. That approach reduces the ironic process by stopping the inner tug-of-war. In everyday life, this means giving up the fight. Not in defeat, but in understanding. If a thought shows up, notice it. Don't chase it away. Don't chase it at all. Focus on what you do want to think about. If you want to be calm, breathe and feel the breath. If you want to sleep, let your attention rest on something neutral, like background sounds. Bring your mind to the task, not by forcing it, but by returning to it gently, over and over. The mind is a pattern detector. It returns to what it thinks is important. Telling yourself not to think about something gives that thought weight. The brain treats it as relevant and repeats it. But if you acknowledge the thought and let it pass without action, the brain learns it's not urgent. It fades on its own. The ironic process isn't about failure. It's a built-in feature of how attention works. When we stop fighting thoughts and start working with them, they lose their grip. The goal isn't control, it's awareness. From there, real change can happen. A person sets out to be happier. They start a new routine, listen to podcasts, write gratitude lists, and read books filled with advice. They make a vision board, repeat positive affirmations, and try to cut out anything that doesn't bring them joy. But after a few weeks, they feel frustrated. They're not happier. In fact, they might feel more anxious, more dissatisfied, and more unsure of why the effort isn't working. This is the happiness paradox. Chasing happiness too hard often leaves you feeling less happy. The idea seems strange at first. Isn't it good to want to be happy? Isn't that what we're supposed to aim for? But the pursuit itself can become the problem. When you treat happiness like a goal, it becomes something to achieve. That shifts the focus from living your life to measuring your mood. Every moment gets judged. Am I happy enough? Should I feel more joy right now? Why don't I feel better? This mindset turns happiness into a task. You start scanning your experiences for emotional payoff. You might go on a vacation and ask yourself throughout the trip whether you're having fun. That constant checking pulls you out of the moment. You're no longer in the experience, you're evaluating it. Even a good time can feel thin when you're looking at it through a lens of expectation. Expectations are a big part of the problem. When you decide you want to be happier, you often create a picture of what happiness should look like. Maybe it's feeling peaceful all the time. Maybe it's constant excitement. Maybe it's having a perfect relationship or meaningful work. But real life doesn't always match the picture. There are delays, arguments, disappointments. When your actual experience doesn't fit your imagined version of happiness, you feel like you've fallen short, even when things are objectively fine. Consider someone who plans a weekend to recharge. They expect it to be calm and uplifting, but the weather is bad. Their plans get canceled, and they feel restless. Instead of adjusting, they feel like the whole weekend is a failure. The expectation of happiness made the normal ups and downs of life feel like a problem. There's also the issue of control. Happiness is not something you can hold on to. It comes and goes. It depends on many factors, some internal, some external. When you try to control your mood, you can end up feeling stuck. You might avoid situations that don't promise a positive emotional return. You might pull away from things that are meaningful but also difficult. That creates a narrow life. In trying to protect your happiness, you reduce your chances of finding it. Think about someone who leads a good job because it doesn't make them happy every day. They move on to something new, hoping for a better feeling. But no job brings joy all the time. Now they're back where they started, maybe even more frustrated. Chasing happiness made them lose sight of the value that was already present: security, connection, or purpose, even if it didn't feel good every moment. Another risk is comparison. When you're focused on becoming happier, you start looking around. Social media, in particular, creates endless examples of people who seem more joyful, more fulfilled, more successful. You measure your life against those images. But those images are often filtered, curated, or exaggerated. Comparing your private experience to someone's public display sets you up to feel like you're missing something. A person might scroll through pictures of a friend's trip, then look at their own quiet day at home and feel like their life is less exciting. But they're not seeing the whole story. They're seeing a highlight. The chase for happiness makes those comparisons feel urgent and real. You feel like you need to catch up. This doesn't mean happiness is out of reach, but it's often a side effect, not a target. People tend to feel happier when they're absorbed in what they're doing, when they're not thinking about happiness at all. Flow states, meaningful conversations, shared laughter, these don't come from effortful striving. They come from presence, connection, and engagement. Someone gardening, playing music, or building something with their hands might feel calm or joyful, not because they set out to be happy, but because they were focused and involved. The satisfaction comes from the activity itself, not from watching themselves feel it. When you stop trying to feel good and start doing things that matter to you, good feelings often follow, but not always, and not right away. Some forms of meaning carry discomfort. Raising a child, caring for a sick relative, learning a skill. These are valuable experiences, but they're not always fun. If you judge them by how happy they make you feel in the moment, you might miss their deeper value. But if you stay with them, they often bring a kind of grounded satisfaction that lasts. This is one reason people often report feeling more content later in life. They stop chasing highs and start appreciating smaller things. They stop expecting life to feel amazing all the time. That shift lets them enjoy what's already there. It doesn't take effort, it takes attention. Gratitude works in a similar way. People who practice gratitude don't usually try to feel grateful. They notice what's present: a warm drink, a kind word, a quiet moment. By noticing what's real, they make space for positive feelings to emerge on their own. But if you write a gratitude list just to feel better, it can lose its effect. You turn the practice into a tool to chase an emotion, and it stops working. Mindfulness offers another example. People who meditate to get rid of stress often feel more stressed during practice. They expect peace, but their mind keeps wandering. They judge themselves. They try harder. But mindfulness isn't about getting rid of thoughts. It's about noticing them. When the pressure to feel better drops, awareness takes its place. That space allows emotions to rise and fall without pushing them around. Even relationships are shaped by this paradox. If you expect your partner to make you happy, every conflict becomes a threat. If they don't act the way you want, you feel disappointed. But if you see relationships as a place to share life, not a constant source of happiness, you approach them with more patience. You listen, you grow. That creates a more solid base for moments of joy to appear. A happiness paradox shows up when we treat emotions like problems to solve. It shifts when we stop aiming and start participating. Happiness is not a finish line. It's a byproduct. It shows up when you stop measuring, comparing, or chasing. It has room to appear when you're living your life, not evaluating it. People often say they want something new. They want change, excitement, discovery. They talk about trying new foods, meeting new people, exploring new places. But when the moment comes, they often go back to what they know. They order the same dish, sit in the same seat, watch the same shows. This is the familiarity paradox. We seek novelty, but feel safest in the familiar. Someone scrolls through a list of restaurants and picks the one they always go to. They tell themselves they'll try something different next time, but when faced with a choice, they lean toward comfort. It's not just about taste. It's about knowing what to expect. Familiarity offers a kind of quiet relief, the absence of risk. There's no need to figure anything out or guess how it might turn out. You already know. The brain plays a role in this. It prefers patterns. When something feels familiar, the brain uses less energy. It runs on default settings. That's why you can drive home without remembering the turns you made. Your brain doesn't need to think about it. It recognizes the route. That same principle shows up in how we make decisions. Familiar options feel easier, even when we say we want something new. Think of someone who wants to move to a new city. They research places, look at apartments, talk to friends who've made similar moves. But they stay put. Not because the new place isn't appealing, but because leaving what's known feels uncomfortable. Even if the current situation isn't great, it's predictable. That predictability has value. It creates a sense of control, even if it comes with limits. This isn't always conscious. People don't always realize how much they rely on the familiar. A person might complain about their job every day, but stay for years. They might say they want a different kind of relationship, but return to the same dynamics again and again. Novelty sounds good in theory. In practice, it asks you to let go of control. That's where tension shows up. Social behavior reflects this too. In a group setting, people often talk to those they already know. Even at events designed to meet new people, most stick to safe zones. They cluster with friends. They rehearse known stories. It's not because they lack interest in others. It's because unfamiliar interactions come with more uncertainty. What if there's awkward silence? What if they're judged? Familiarity lowers the risk. This also appears in habits. Someone might try a new workout or hobby, but when life gets busy, they return to their old routine. That return isn't failure. It's a return to stability. When stressed, the brain seeks grounding. The familiar offers that. It's a home base. It may not be ideal, but it's known. At the same time, the desire for novelty doesn't go away. People still want to grow, learn, change. That creates a push and pull. One part of the mind craves stimulation. The other part avoids the discomfort of uncertainty. That tension is the paradox. You want what's new, but you retreat to what's old. This often plays out in relationships. Someone might say they're drawn to a certain type of person, but keep dating the same kind. They look for variety, but find themselves back in a similar pattern. It's not just attraction. It's a pull toward the familiar, toward behaviors or dynamics they've learned to navigate. Even if those patterns aren't healthy, they're predictable. Predictability offers a sense of control, which the brain interprets as safety. Media consumption reflects this too. Streaming services offer thousands of titles, but many people rewatch the same shows. Not because nothing better is available, but because known plots reduce anxiety. There's no suspense. You know what's coming. In a world full of noise, that kind of certainty feels restful. Childhood experiences shape this even further. What we grow up around becomes our baseline. A person raised in a quiet home might seek peace, while someone raised around conflict might unconsciously feel more alert in tension. Familiar doesn't always mean pleasant. It means recognizable. And the recognizable feels easier to manage. Think of someone raised with constant pressure. As an adult, they might say they want to relax. But when things finally slow down, they feel unsettled. The calm feels foreign. They might create new tasks, start new projects, stir up conflict. Not because they want stress, but because stress feels familiar. It fits the emotional blueprint they know. This doesn't mean people can't change or grow, but the process often includes returning to old habits, not out of failure, but out of habit. Change threatens stability. It can trigger doubts, resistance, and even fear. So the mind tests it. It retreats, then moves forward again. Progress isn't always a straight line. It often circles back before moving ahead. Even in creativity, this paradox appears. Artists talk about pushing boundaries, but often return to recurring themes. Musicians experiment but fall back on their core sound. Writers explore new subjects but reuse certain structures or tones. Familiarity provides a frame. Within that frame, new ideas feel less risky. Consumer behavior shows the same trend. A person might try a new brand once, but if it disappoints even slightly, they return to the trusted one. The familiar becomes the standard against which new things are measured. And often, the new thing falls short, not because it's worse, but because it's unfamiliar. Travel is another example. People visit new places, try new food, see new things. But even then, they seek out familiar signs, chain restaurants, known brands, languages they understand. Novelty feels best when paired with anchors of safety. Too much of the unfamiliar at once becomes overwhelming. A balanced mix feels better. Language reflects this too. Phrases like creature of habit, better the devil you know, or comfort zone all point to the same idea. We return to the known even while we wish for change. There's comfort in repetition, in routines, in patterns. The mind relaxes when it doesn't have to scan for threats. This doesn't mean novelty is bad. Trying new things opens up growth. But the desire for the new often competes with the pull of the familiar. Recognizing this tension helps explain behavior that might otherwise seem inconsistent. You can crave change and still feel pulled to stay where you are. You can enjoy something new but miss something old. That's not contradiction. It's part of how people manage risk and reward. The Familiarity Paradox doesn't suggest that growth isn't possible. It shows that the mind balances safety and change. It moves between comfort and challenge. It returns to what it knows, not because it's the best, but because it feels like home. Even when home isn't perfect, a person picks up a self-help book to feel better. They want direction, purpose, or relief from stress. The book offers a list of habits, mindsets, and rules to follow. It promises clarity and confidence. At first, it helps. The advice feels sharp and reassuring. But by the end, something starts to shift. The person doesn't feel more certain. They feel less sure. They wonder if they've been doing life wrong all along. This is the self-help paradox. The more you try to fix yourself, the more broken you may feel. Self-help often starts with a quiet suggestion. Something in you needs improvement. That may be true. Everyone has parts of life they'd like to change. But when the message is repeated, book after book, video after video, it begins to feel like a constant judgment. You're always behind. You're never quite good enough. You need one more routine, one more breakthrough, one more shift in mindset. That can turn the desire to grow into a cycle of self-doubt. Instead of building confidence, each new piece of advice reminds you that you're not there yet. The target keeps moving. You learn that you should wake up earlier, meditate longer, eat cleaner, journal every day, set better goals, manage your time, control your thoughts, improve your posture, breathe differently, and never waste a second. You start to look at ordinary parts of life, rest, boredom, mistakes, as signs of failure. The tools offered are not always the problem. Many are useful, but too much focus on self-improvement turns life into a project with no finish line. Every moment becomes an opportunity to perform better. That constant pressure to optimize leads to burnout, not balance. Someone might read about morning routines and decide to wake up at 5. They plan a schedule with cold showers, breathing exercises, journaling, and focused work. After a few days, it feels forced. They miss a step. They feel behind. What began as motivation now feels like failure. The method didn't break them. The belief that they should always be improving did. Social media adds to the problem. Self-help content is everywhere. Quotes, tips, hacks, life lessons packaged in shortcuts. It's easy to scroll and easy to compare. You see people who seem centered and calm, always making progress, always leveling up. That creates a false baseline. You compare your messy reality to someone else's highlight reel. You don't just want help, you want to become someone else entirely. That desire can slip into shame. A person reads 5 books on confidence, but still feels awkward at work. They blame themselves. Maybe they didn't apply the advice right. Maybe they missed a step. They keep looking for new material, thinking the next one will unlock something. But with each new fix, the message repeats, you're not there yet. It's not that self-help always harms. The danger comes when it becomes a lifestyle. Constant improvement turns into constant self-surveillance. Every thought, mood, or choice becomes data. You stop living and start tracking. A walk isn't just a walk. It's a chance to reflect on goals. A meal isn't just food. It's a chance to test discipline. Even joy can feel like work if you're always measuring it. Some content also makes assumptions. It speaks to people as if they're broken or lost. It treats ordinary problems like emergencies. Feeling stuck becomes a personal flaw. Wanting rest becomes laziness. Being uncertain becomes weakness. That language shapes how people see themselves. A normal range of emotions starts to feel unacceptable. People dealing with stress or sadness often reach for self-help. But if the message they hear is fix yourself now, it can deepen the stress. Instead of accepting their current state, they resist it. They try to force change. But resistance adds tension, and tension blocks reflection. They end up feeling more out of place. Consider someone struggling with a breakup. They read a book about emotional resilience. The advice is sound. Focus on growth. Let go. Stay present. But when the sadness doesn't go away, they blame themselves. They think, why isn't this working? But grief doesn't follow rules. It's not a problem to solve. It's an experience to move through. Self-help, in this case, tried to speed up something that needed time. Even spiritual self-help can add pressure. Ideas like attract what you think or you create your reality sound empowering, but they can backfire. Someone going through hard times might feel guilty for thinking negative thoughts. They start to believe they've caused their pain by not being positive enough. That's not growth. That's magical thinking wrapped in self-blame. This doesn't mean growth is bad. It means that growth needs room. Room for failure, confusion, slow progress, and contradiction. A person might learn something useful from a book or video, then forget it. That's normal. They might apply an idea for a while, then drift from it. Also normal. Growth isn't always visible. It often happens in the background, not on a checklist. Another trap is chasing identity. People sometimes use self-help to define themselves. They collect habits, beliefs, or labels that say who they are. But identity is fluid. If you hold on too tightly to a version of yourself shaped by a book or a method, you might resist change. What once helped you can start to limit you. Growth becomes another performance. You can also drown in contradictions. One book says take control. Another says surrender. One coach says hustle harder. Another says slow down. You try to follow both and end up stuck. The more advice you consume, the more confused you feel. You don't need more answers. You need fewer voices. A person might find more peace by doing less. Fewer rules, fewer habits, less tracking, more space. That space makes room for reflection. Without the pressure to become something, you can notice what you already are. You might realize that what felt broken was just human, that your need to change was driven by discomfort, not truth. Self-help, at its best, points you back to your own experience, not to someone else's model, not to a system or a blueprint, just to what's happening now. But to do that, you have to pause the chase. You have to ask, what am I avoiding by trying to improve? Sometimes the answer is pain. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's silence. Real growth often looks like stillness. It looks like sitting with discomfort, not solving it. It looks like letting go of the idea that you need to be different. It's not a project, it's a process. And sometimes the most helpful thing is not one more book, but a break from all of them. Someone feels anger rise during a conversation. Their voice tightens, but they smile and say everything's fine. Later, they replay the moment in their head. They tell themselves they overreacted. They push the feeling down and move on. A few days pass, and another small conflict brings the same feeling back, stronger this time. They still don't speak up. The pattern repeats. Over time, the original frustration grows into resentment. This is the emotional suppression paradox. The more you try to push negative emotions away, the more they build. Suppressing emotions doesn't make them disappear, it delays them. When you hold back anger, sadness, fear, or shame, the body still feels them. You might not express them, but your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, your breathing shifts, the emotional charge stays active in the nervous system, even when the mind tries to move on. That tension doesn't vanish, it stores itself. The brain tracks unresolved feelings. It treats them like open tabs in a browser. Even when you're focused on something else, a part of your mind keeps circling back. You don't always notice it. It might show up as fatigue, distraction, irritability, or a dull pressure you can't explain. That pressure builds. One small trigger, an offhand comment, a missed call, a broken glass, can cause a reaction that feels out of proportion. But it's not about the glass. It's everything that came before it. Take grief. A person loses someone close but tries to stay strong. They keep busy. They tell themselves not to cry, not to dwell, not to fall apart. Weeks pass. They think they've moved on, but a song, a smell, or a quiet evening brings the sadness back with force. The delay doesn't weaken the emotion, it just changes its shape. What could have come out in small, natural waves now crashes as a wall. This happens with fear too. Someone feels anxious about an upcoming change, moving, starting a new job, ending a relationship. Instead of naming the fear, they downplay it. They act as if they're fine, but their body tells another story. Sleep gets worse, headaches increase, they feel on edge for no clear reason. The fear hasn't gone away, it's gone inward. When people suppress emotions, they often believe they're being strong or mature. They don't want to overreact or burden others. They believe that ignoring feelings will protect them or the people around them. In the short term, it might help. You can get through a hard conversation or stay composed in a public setting. But over time, the emotional load compounds. The body carries what the voice doesn't release. Relationships feel the weight of this. A person who avoids conflict may seem easygoing, but over time they withdraw. They stop sharing honestly. Their partner senses something is off, but doesn't know what. Connection weakens. When the person finally speaks, the emotion behind their words is sharper than expected. What could have been a small, clear moment becomes a bigger rupture. Workplaces show this pattern too. Someone doesn't speak up about frustration with a team member. They keep performing, keep smiling, but their engagement drops. They start avoiding meetings or working around the problem. Productivity looks fine on paper, but morale slips. The silence becomes a barrier. What felt like avoiding drama becomes the cause of tension. Emotion, like any other signal, needs to be processed. You can't process what you don't allow. When feelings are pushed aside, they don't fade, they ferment. They turn into bitterness, defensiveness, cynicism, or burnout. You start to overreact to small issues or detach from things that used to matter. The emotional backlog catches up. Suppression also limits access to positive emotions. When you numb one feeling, others go dull. A person who doesn't let themselves feel grief may also struggle to feel joy. The range of emotion narrows. Life starts to feel flat. They miss moments of connection because they've trained themselves not to feel too much. The same habits that protect from pain also block pleasure. Children learn this early. If a child hears "stop crying" every time they're upset, they learn to hide their feelings. They start to think of emotions as problems, not signals. That belief grows up with them. As adults, they struggle to identify or express what they feel. They might lash out or shut down. They don't know how to sit with hard emotions because they were taught to move past them quickly. That teaching shows up in phrases like "stay positive," "look on the bright side," or "don't let it get to you." These messages, often meant to comfort, sometimes encourage suppression. They create the sense that hard feelings aren't allowed. But feelings don't follow commands. They follow attention. What you push down tends to push back. Some people turn to distraction. They stay busy, scroll constantly, work longer hours. Others turn to numbing: food, alcohol, entertainment. These can provide temporary relief, but they don't process the emotion. They pause it. When the pause ends, the emotion returns, often stronger, because now it comes with guilt, confusion, or physical symptoms. Avoidance becomes habit. A person starts to fear their own feelings. They avoid anything that might stir them. But this leads to a shrinking life. They stop taking risks, stop having honest conversations, stop being present, all to avoid a wave that might never come, or that wouldn't last long if it did. Allowing emotion doesn't mean acting on every feeling. It means acknowledging what's present, saying, "I feel angry," or "I'm scared right now," can be enough. That pause creates space. The emotion is named, not denied. It moves through instead of getting stuck. Therapists often use a practice called affect labeling. When a client names an emotion, the intensity of that emotion often drops. Brain scans show this clearly. The act of putting a feeling into words reduces activity in the emotional centers and increases activity in the thinking centers. It gives you more control, not by pushing the emotion away, but by facing it directly. Journaling can serve a similar role. So can speaking with someone you trust. Expression doesn't need to be dramatic. It needs to be honest. "I'm overwhelmed. I feel left out. I'm hurt by that." Small truths open doors. They allow energy to move. They reduce the backlog. Some feelings don't resolve in one moment, but they settle more easily when they're seen. Just like the body heals a wound it can reach, the mind settles emotions it can access. Suppression keeps them hidden. Awareness brings them into light. Emotions are not problems. They are responses. They give information. They show what matters. When you try to silence them, you silence part of your own experience. And over time, that silence doesn't bring peace. It brings pressure. The paradox of emotional suppression is that control leads to more chaos, not less. The path forward isn't hiding what you feel. It's learning to face it, name it, and let it move. Someone wants to be more authentic. They read about the importance of being true to yourself. They hear that real confidence comes from showing up as who you really are. So they try. They speak with more honesty, post thoughts they might have kept private, and make choices that feel bold. But after a while, something feels off. The effort to be authentic starts to feel like a performance. They begin watching themselves, asking, "Is this the real me?" Instead of feeling free, they feel more self-conscious. This is the authenticity paradox. Trying too hard to be authentic can make you feel inauthentic. Authenticity sounds simple. Be yourself, say what you think, act from your values. But the moment you turn it into a goal, it changes. You start measuring your own behavior. You start thinking in layers. Was that really me? Or was I trying to impress someone? Am I being too filtered? Did I hold back too much? That constant self-monitoring pulls you away from the very quality you're trying to access. Being yourself works best when you're not thinking about it. It's something that happens when you're engaged, relaxed, or focused on something outside of yourself. In those moments, you're not checking if you're being real. You're just present. You say what comes naturally. You respond without calculation. But when you try to be authentic on purpose, you split your attention. One part of you acts, while another part judges. That judgment makes things complicated. You might start editing yourself in reverse. If you usually keep things polite, you push yourself to be blunt. If you tend to stay quiet, you push yourself to speak more. You act in ways that feel unfiltered because you think authenticity means full exposure. But raw doesn't always mean real. Sometimes silence is true. Sometimes kindness is honest. When you use authenticity as a rule, you stop trusting your instincts. This often happens in new settings. A person starts a new job and tells themselves to be authentic. But instead of adapting naturally, they focus on how to present themselves. They want to be seen as real, not fake. That desire creates pressure. They overthink what to say, how to say it, and what others will think. Their behavior becomes shaped by the image they're trying to maintain. The effort makes them stiff, not sincere. It happens in relationships too. Someone wants to form deeper connections. They've read that vulnerability builds trust, so they share something personal early on. But they're not sure if the timing is right. They're not sure if they feel it fully. Still, they push ahead because they want to be open. The moment feels heavy instead of natural. They later wonder if it came across as forced, in trying to show their true self. They skip the part where connection grows over time. Social media highlights the paradox. People are told to be authentic online. Share your real thoughts. Show your real life. But these platforms are built around visibility. Every post is a display. The line between real and curated blurs. A person might post something honest, then wait to see how it lands. If it's well received, they do more of it. If it's ignored, they adjust. Their sense of self becomes tied to feedback. Authenticity becomes strategy. This can lead to confusion. Someone might wonder if they've lost their sense of who they are. They try new versions of themselves to find one that feels right. But every version is shaped by the search. Each choice feels more like a test than an expression. That kind of uncertainty isn't weakness. It's part of being human. People are complex. They change, they adapt. There is no single, authentic self waiting to be discovered. The idea of one true self is appealing. It suggests clarity and certainty. But in practice, identity is layered. Who you are at work might differ from who you are with close friends. That doesn't mean you're fake. It means you respond to context. You bring out different parts of yourself depending on what's needed. If you treat any shift as inauthentic, you box yourself in. Imagine a teacher who acts more serious in the classroom and more relaxed at home. That's not deception, it's range. Or think about someone who's usually confident but feels awkward in a new setting. That awkwardness isn't inauthentic. It's just part of being real in a moment that's unfamiliar. Authenticity doesn't mean always being the same. It means being consistent with your values, even if your behavior varies. The problem grows when people start chasing authenticity as a sign of success. They want to appear natural, confident, grounded. They want others to say, "They're so real." But the desire to look authentic often leads to controlled behavior. It becomes a kind of image management. Ironically, that creates the very mask they're trying to avoid. Marketing picks up on this. Brands and influencers talk about authenticity as a selling point. They show behind-the-scenes content, flaws, struggles. Some of it is honest, some of it is calculated. The line gets blurry. Viewers respond to what feels genuine, but when authenticity is packaged, it risks losing its truth. People can sense when openness becomes a tactic. This can also happen in therapy or personal development. Someone starts to examine their behavior. They look for patterns, wounds, motivations. They want to strip away their false self. That process can be helpful, but if the goal becomes to always act from a pure, centered self, the pressure rises. Every decision starts to feel like a test. Every mood gets analyzed. Self-reflection turns into self-doubt. Instead of trying to be authentic, some people benefit more from focusing on clarity. What do you care about right now? What do you need? What feels honest in this moment? Those questions point to action, not image. You're not chasing a version of yourself. You're responding to life as it is. Authenticity isn't a goal to achieve. It's the byproduct of paying attention to your real experience. That includes your discomfort, your confusion, and your mixed motives. No one is perfectly aligned all the time. You might do something generous and still want credit. You might tell the truth, but soften the edges. That doesn't make you fake. It makes you a person. Trying too hard to be authentic often creates tension. It pulls you into a loop of self-monitoring and adjustment. You end up watching yourself act instead of simply acting. What feels natural becomes filtered through expectation. What was meant to free you now holds you back. Letting go of the need to appear authentic often leads to more sincerity. You stop performing a version of yourself. You stop treating your identity as a brand. You allow your mood to shift, your tone to vary, and your responses to evolve. That flexibility makes room for honesty. Not perfect consistency, but real presence. A person graduates from school and has no more deadlines, no more classes, no one telling them where to be or what to do. They thought this would feel like freedom, and for a moment, it does. But after a few days or weeks, they start to feel lost. There are too many choices. They don't know where to start. The lack of structure, once exciting, begins to feel like a weight. This is the freedom paradox. Having complete freedom can feel overwhelming, even paralyzing. So people often seek structure or impose limits on themselves to feel grounded. Freedom is often seen as the ultimate goal. People want to be free from rules, schedules, and obligations. But total freedom, with no clear direction, brings a different kind of pressure. You become responsible for everything: your time, your goals, your outcomes. That pressure can lead to indecision, doubt, and even regret. With no clear path, every step becomes a question. Is this the right choice? Take someone who leaves a corporate job to work for themselves. They used to have set hours, regular meetings, and specific tasks. Now they have full control over their time. No boss, no clock. At first, it feels like success, but soon they notice the stress creeping in. They wake up and don't know where to begin. They spend hours planning, switching tasks, doubting their decisions. Without structure, work spreads into every corner of the day. Rest becomes harder. Progress feels uncertain. Even vacations show this pattern. Someone books a week off with no plans. They picture rest, fun, maybe a bit of adventure. But without some kind of schedule, the days blur. They stay up late, sleep in, scroll through options, and struggle to decide how to spend their time. By the end of the week, they feel restless, like they wasted it. The lack of structure didn't create freedom, it created drift. Structure doesn't have to mean control from the outside. It can come from habits, routines, and clear limits people choose for themselves. These limits reduce decision fatigue and help create focus. When you don't have to choose everything, you can use your energy on doing, not deciding. The brain works better when it has some boundaries. Freedom within a frame leads to better results than endless options. Think of a writer with no deadline. They can work whenever they want. But the open-ended nature of the project often delays progress. They revise endlessly, doubt each paragraph, avoid starting. Now think of a writer with a strict deadline. They don't have time to second guess. They focus, write, and finish. The pressure of the limit brings clarity. The freedom to write anything becomes manageable when shaped by time. This applies to creative work in general. Artists, designers, and musicians often say they do their best work under constraints: a theme, a size limit, a time block. These help them focus. Without limits, they get stuck in ideas. With limits, they solve problems. They become more inventive. Total freedom doesn't create more creativity, it can block it. Children show this too. When kids are given full control over everything, they become anxious or frustrated. They want options, but too many at once leads to overload. Clear rules, predictable routines, and safe boundaries help them feel secure. That security gives them space to explore. Adults are no different. The desire for complete freedom often gives way to a need for stability. People create rituals to give shape to their day. Morning routines, workout plans, screen time limits, and budgeting tools all serve the same purpose. They reduce the burden of constant choice. They create rhythm. Even something as simple as wearing the same type of outfit each day can reduce mental clutter. These are self-imposed limits, chosen not out of weakness, but out of respect for how attention works. Social behavior also reflects this. A person might say they want to be free to speak their mind in any situation, but in practice, they filter their words, they consider context, they adapt. This is not inauthentic. It's part of functioning in a shared world. Total freedom to say anything at any time doesn't build trust, it isolates. People seek connection, which often requires restraint. The same goes for moral or ethical beliefs. Some people adopt religious or philosophical systems, not because they want to give up freedom, but because they want to live with intention. Rules become tools for alignment. Limits become a way to stay grounded. In this context, freedom without direction feels shallow. Discipline brings depth. Even leisure activities show the same principle. Someone with an open weekend might choose to go hiking, then follow a trail map instead of wandering. The path gives them freedom to enjoy the walk without getting lost. Or someone might follow a recipe rather than cook from scratch. They still make something new, but they have a frame to work within. The result is satisfying because the structure helped bring it to life. Modern life increases the freedom paradox. Technology offers constant options: what to watch, read, buy, or do. Algorithms respond to your preferences, showing more of what you like. But this creates a flood of content. The more you can choose, the harder it becomes to decide. People spend hours scrolling, not because they're free, but because they're stuck. The feeling of missing out makes each choice feel heavier. Dating apps, streaming platforms, and online shopping all amplify this. The variety is endless, but too much variety leads to uncertainty. When there's always a better option one swipe away, you second guess what you have. You don't commit, you keep searching. The promise of freedom leads to dissatisfaction. Some people respond by setting firm limits. They delete apps. They block certain times of day. They take digital breaks. These actions restore balance, not by removing freedom, but by shaping it. The limit gives them back control over their attention. They choose what to focus on by removing what distracts them. Freedom becomes more useful when it includes direction. When people don't know what matters to them, freedom feels heavy. But when they have values, goals, or clear needs, they can use freedom well. They can say yes or no with purpose. They don't just drift between options, they move towards something. The freedom paradox isn't a flaw in freedom itself. It's a reflection of how the human mind deals with choice. People want agency, but they also want clarity. They want to explore, but they need a starting point. Total freedom sounds ideal, but it often leads to doubt, delay, and a sense of being unmoored. Structure, far from limiting people, can free them to act with more confidence. A frame doesn't reduce freedom, it focuses it. Someone wants to start exercising. They set a goal, buy the shoes, and plan the routine. But when the time comes to begin, they wait. They want to feel ready. They think the right mindset will show up if they're patient. Days pass, maybe weeks. The shoes stay clean. The plan stays on paper. This is the motivation paradox. People often think they need motivation to act, but in most cases, action comes first. Waiting for motivation usually leads to nothing. Starting, even without the feeling, is what creates momentum. Motivation is not a switch you turn on. It's a result. It follows effort, not the other way around. Once you start moving, once you take the first step, you feel more able to keep going. The brain responds to movement. Small progress builds energy. You feel like doing more because you already did something. But if you wait to feel ready before you begin, the waiting itself drains your energy. Take writing as an example. A person stares at a blank screen, telling themselves they'll start when the words come. But the words don't come until they begin typing. Often, the first few lines are rough or disconnected, but then a phrase works, a sentence flows, and the work moves forward. The writer didn't start because they were inspired. They were inspired because they started. Motivation is tied to emotion. It rises and falls. It reacts to sleep, mood, weather, and stress. If you rely on it to drive your choices, your habits will be unpredictable. You'll move in bursts, then stop. That cycle leaves you stuck. A task feels hard, you avoid it. Avoidance makes it feel even harder. You wait for motivation, but all you get is guilt. Discipline works differently. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It gives you a clear next step. You brush your teeth without motivation. You get dressed without needing a burst of energy. Those are habits, and they follow routine, not mood. You can apply the same approach to harder goals. Start small, make it automatic, then let motivation catch up. Think of someone learning an instrument. In the beginning, practice doesn't feel good. It's slow, awkward, repetitive. If they waited to feel excited before every session, they'd quit. But if they play for just 10 minutes a day, the routine sets in. Progress appears. Enjoyment follows. The drive to continue grows. Not because they were always motivated, but because they showed up anyway. This also applies to exercise. People say they want to feel motivated to go to the gym. But many who go regularly don't feel a rush of inspiration. They just go. It's part of their day, like eating or showering. On tired days, they go anyway. Once they start moving, energy builds. The hardest part is getting through the door. After that, the body responds. The feeling follows the act. Motivation comes in waves. You can't control when it shows up, but you can create conditions that invite it. If your space is clear, your tools are ready, and your steps are simple, you reduce friction. That makes starting easier. And starting is where the shift happens. A few minutes into a task, your focus sharpens. Your mind engages. What felt heavy now feels doable. That's the paradox in action. Another way to break the cycle is by lowering the bar. People often think they need to go all in, but extreme goals increase resistance. If you tell yourself to write 1,000 words, you might not even open your laptop. But if you tell yourself to write one sentence, you'll probably write 5. If you plan to run 5 miles, you might stay on the couch. But if the goal is to put on your shoes and walk around the block, you might end up jogging. Small tasks reduce the mental wall. That first step, no matter how small, creates a new mood. This works in emotional tasks too. If someone feels stuck in a difficult conversation, they might wait for the right mood to speak. But silence builds distance. If they send a short message, make a simple gesture, or ask one question, the tension breaks. That action softens both sides. Momentum builds, and the bigger conversation becomes possible. In school or work, waiting for motivation often delays basic tasks. Students stare at assignments, hoping for clarity. Workers avoid projects until they feel inspired. But most clarity comes during the work, not before it. Outlines sharpen while writing. Presentations take shape once the first slide is done. You don't need a full plan to begin. You need to begin to see the plan. This doesn't mean emotion doesn't matter. It just means you don't need to wait for the perfect one. You can start from a place of doubt, fatigue, or hesitation. Starting changes the feeling. It puts you in motion. Once in motion, you can adjust. The task becomes real. It moves from thought into action. There's also less risk than people think. Many fear starting without motivation will lead to poor results. But done is better than perfect. You can revise later. What matters is creating the conditions for forward movement. If you sit down and sketch, draft, lift, clean, or practice, no matter the outcome, you break the cycle of avoidance. People often talk themselves out of action with thoughts like, "I'm not ready," or "it's not the right time." But those thoughts aren't facts. They're defense mechanisms. They protect you from discomfort, but the discomfort shrinks once you start. What looked like a mountain often becomes a hill after the first few steps. One useful approach is the 5-minute rule. Commit to working on something for 5 minutes. After that, you can stop if you want. Most of the time, you won't. Once the gear is moving, you feel pulled to continue. The rule lowers pressure while increasing action. It makes you less dependent on internal drive. Motivation also grows through identity. When you act consistently, even in small ways, you start to see yourself differently. A person who writes daily, even one sentence, starts to see themselves as a writer. A person who trains regularly starts to feel like an athlete. That identity shift reinforces the behavior. You act first, then believe. Belief builds motivation. This shift in focus, from waiting to doing, creates stability. It gives you control over how you move through resistance. You don't need to feel ready. You need to begin. From there, your energy can change. Your focus can grow. Your motivation can follow. A person earns a promotion, wins an award, or delivers a strong presentation. People praise their work. They nod, smile, say thank you, but inside they feel off. They wonder how long it will take before someone sees through them. They question if the success was luck, or timing, or someone else's mistake. This is not modesty. It's something deeper. It's the Impostor Syndrome paradox. High achievers often feel like frauds, not because they've done too little, but because they expect too much from themselves. This mindset doesn't come from lack of skill. In many cases, it shows up in people with strong track records, people who hit goals, take on challenges, and earn trust. But instead of feeling secure, they feel like they're pretending. That feeling grows not from failure, but from setting internal standards so high that nothing ever feels good enough. Each achievement gets rewritten. I got lucky. They were being kind. It wasn't that hard. The person disconnects from their own effort. They also treat success as temporary. One good result doesn't count. It just raises the bar for the next one. Now they have to prove themselves again. Each win brings pressure. Each compliment feels risky. If others expect more now, what happens if they fall short? That fear builds in silence. The person rarely talks about it because they think no one else feels this way. This pressure often starts early. Someone praised for being smart or talented may develop the belief that they have to keep proving it, not once, but all the time. Mistakes don't just feel like errors, they feel like exposure. If they get something wrong, it threatens the story they believe others have about them. So they aim higher, they prepare more, they avoid asking for help. They don't want to show gaps. Perfectionism feeds this. A high achiever often ties their self-worth to performance. If the work isn't perfect, they feel like they've failed. If they struggle, they think it means they're not good enough. This belief leads to unrealistic expectations. They think, if I were truly capable, this wouldn't be hard. But difficulty isn't a sign of weakness. It's part of doing anything that matters. Still, the feeling persists. This creates a cycle. The person works hard, achieves something, and feels temporary relief, but then they move the target. They don't let themselves absorb the success. They focus on what they didn't do or what still needs improvement. That constant shifting keeps them from feeling settled. They stay on edge, always one mistake away from being found out. Feedback can make this worse. Even when it's positive, it doesn't always land. A person with imposter thoughts may smile and nod, but inside, they question the feedback. They tell themselves the other person doesn't have the full picture. Where they discount the praise because they believe it only applies to a small part of what they did. The gap between how others see them and how they see themselves grows wider. This paradox isn't just internal. It shows up in how people behave. Someone who feels like a fraud might over-prepare, triple-check their work, or avoid taking risks. They play it safe, not because they lack ambition, but because they fear the feeling of being exposed. Ironically, their performance stays high, but the cost is emotional strain. They never feel like they can rest. It can also lead to hiding. A person may avoid opportunities that match their skill level. They think, I'm not ready, or I don't belong there. They might downplay their strengths in interviews or meetings. They might hesitate to share ideas, worried they'll be challenged. They don't want to be wrong in public, so they wait, even when they're more prepared than most. This fear doesn't always match reality. Most people around them don't see a fraud. They see someone capable, reliable, and thoughtful. But the person with imposter thoughts doesn't trust that view. They trust their own self-doubt more. That doubt feels familiar, even logical. It has a script. You just got lucky. You don't really know what you're doing. Others are better than you. That script plays on repeat. Social comparison makes this worse. A person might look at a peer and see confidence, ease, or quick success. They think, that person belongs here, I don't. But they don't see the other person's self-doubt. They see only the outside. Comparing your private struggles to someone else's public surface never tells the full story, but it shapes how you see yourself. Impostor syndrome often hits hardest when someone steps into a new role. A promotion, a new job, or a big project can trigger it. Even when they've earned the opportunity, they feel like they're faking their way through. They don't realize that most people feel uncertain at the edge of their ability. Growth brings discomfort. The feeling of not knowing is part of learning, not a sign of failure. People also confuse confidence with authenticity. They assume that if they don't feel confident, they're not being real. But confidence isn't the same as competence. You can do excellent work while feeling unsure. You can doubt yourself and still deliver. The mistake is thinking that doubt means you're an imposter. In most cases, it means you care. Naming the pattern helps. Saying, "This is imposter thinking," gives you distance. It doesn't fix everything, but it opens a door. You stop taking the thoughts at face value. You notice the gap between how you feel and what's actually true. That shift doesn't make the pressure vanish, but it gives you more control over how you respond to it. It's also useful to look at the standard you hold yourself to. Is it realistic? Would you expect the same from a peer, a friend, or a colleague? Often the answer is no. You make room for others to learn, but not for yourself. You forgive other people's flaws, but stay rigid with your own. That double standard feeds the paradox. Letting yourself be human doesn't mean you stop striving. It means you stop turning every struggle into evidence that you don't belong. High standards can push you to grow, but impossible standards make you shrink. They keep you hiding, questioning, doubting. That's not humility. That's pressure disguised as caution. The most capable people often carry the most doubt, not because they're weak, but because they think deeply, reflect often, and care about doing well. That sensitivity is not a flaw. But when it leads to chronic self-questioning, it becomes a weight. The goal isn't to eliminate doubt completely. It's to stop letting it define you. You don't have to feel like an expert to do good work. You don't have to feel certain to contribute. Most people are figuring things out as they go. Most people carry some version of the same fear. The paradox of imposter syndrome is that those who feel it the most are often the ones least deserving of the label. They're not faking it. They're holding themselves to a standard no one else can see. A person gets invited to a job interview for a position they've wanted for months. They feel excited at first. Then they delay preparing. They tell themselves they work better under pressure. The night before, they stay up late scrolling through their phone. The next day, they feel tired, scattered, and unprepared. They stumble through the interview. Afterward, they say it just wasn't a good fit. On the surface, it looks like procrastination or nerves, but something else is going on. This is the self-sabotage paradox. Sometimes we ruin opportunities not because we fear failure, but because we fear what success might bring. Self-sabotage often looks like laziness or lack of focus, but behind it is usually fear of change, pressure, or responsibility. Success means more eyes on you. It means higher expectations. It might mean leaving a comfort zone you've lived in for years. The brain doesn't just respond to threats of loss. It also reacts to threats of disruption. Even good change can feel like a risk. Take someone who wants to write a book. They have ideas, the skill, and enough time, but they keep starting and stopping. They open a blank document, write a few lines, then delete them. They binge writing advice and tools, but avoid writing. It's not that they can't do it. It's that finishing the book would force them to face what comes next, sharing it, being judged, or maybe even succeeding. That next step feels exposed. Success can bring new problems. If you get the promotion, now you have to lead. If your business grows, now you have more to manage. If your art reaches more people, now you get feedback, some of it critical. Even praise can feel uncomfortable. It brings pressure to perform again. Some people would rather stay in a loop of trying than risk the pressure that comes with arrival. Change also threatens identity. If someone sees themselves as overlooked or underestimated, success can feel disorienting. They've built their story around struggle. When that story no longer fits, they feel off balance. They don't know how to act like the person they're becoming. So they pull back, maybe not on purpose, but in small, quiet ways. They miss deadlines, they skip opportunities, they don't follow up. This is why people sometimes leave things unfinished. If a project stays incomplete, they can always say it had potential. If it's done, it can be judged. They might say, I could have done more if I'd tried, which is easier than facing, I tried and it didn't work out. Or even, I tried and now everything is different. The unknown after success feels scarier than the known struggle before it. Sometimes self-sabotage shows up as overcomplication. A person sets a goal, then builds a plan so detailed that it becomes hard to follow. They spend hours refining the system, the schedule, the routine, but never get started. The plan becomes a shield. As long as they're planning, they don't have to risk change. It looks productive, but it's a delay tactic. Relationships also reveal this pattern. Someone meets a partner who treats them with care and respect. Things go well. But instead of relaxing, they start to pull away. They question the other person's motives. They test boundaries. They pick fights over small things. Part of them believes they don't deserve what they've found, so they push it away before it can be taken from them. That belief, I don't deserve this, often comes from past experience. A person raised in chaos might feel uneasy when things go smoothly. Calm doesn't feel safe. It feels unfamiliar. So they stir things up, not because they want trouble, but because it feels more normal than peace. In that way, self-sabotage is not self-destruction, it's self-protection in disguise. People may also fear becoming someone they no longer recognize. If success means adopting new habits, moving in new circles, or taking on a new role, it can create an identity gap. They wonder if they'll lose touch with friends, with past values, or even with themselves. That fear can keep them stuck in patterns that feel small but safe. Even small changes can trigger this. A person wants to eat better, sleep more, or stop drinking. But when they start making progress, they hit resistance. Their own mind starts whispering reasons to quit. This is too hard. You're not the kind of person who sticks to things. These aren't facts, they're defense mechanisms. Change is hard to hold on to when your self-image hasn't caught up. To break the pattern, you first have to name it, not with shame or blame, but with clarity. Say, I might be pulling back because success scares me. That simple sentence can open a new door. It creates space to ask what you're really afraid of. Is it pressure? Is it being seen? Is it losing your current routine? The next step is to act in small ways, not big leaps, just enough to move forward without triggering alarm. Submit one page, send one email, say yes once. That action builds evidence that you can handle success. Each time you follow through, you teach your nervous system that change is not danger. You build a bridge between who you've been and who you're becoming. It also helps to talk about it. Most people experience some form of self-sabotage, but few admit it. Saying it out loud, "I'm scared of what might happen if this works," can shift the weight. It takes the pressure out of hiding. Others may say, "Me too." That shared truth builds trust and clears space for support. Success doesn't require perfection. It requires tolerance for change. That includes discomfort, doubt, and the fear of outgrowing parts of your old life. Growth often means letting go of familiar pain to make room for unfamiliar ease. That trade feels risky, but it's the only way forward. Self-sabotage isn't a sign that you're weak or lazy. It's a sign that your mind is protecting something. That protection made sense at one point, but it may not serve you now. The job is not to fight it, but to outgrow it, to let action lead the way, to keep going even when part of you wants to turn back. The fear isn't failure. It's what happens when things finally go right. And learning to stay with that feeling is where the real work begins. Someone walks into a meeting room and speaks in a loud voice. Their posture is straight, their handshake is firm, and their words are polished. On the outside, they look confident, but inside, they're anxious. They rehearsed every line, avoided any sign of doubt, and worked hard to hide uncertainty. They feel relief once the meeting ends, but not pride. Their confidence was a mask. This is the confidence paradox. True confidence doesn't come from hiding vulnerability. It comes from accepting it. Confidence is often confused with control. People think if they look perfect, speak without pause, and never show hesitation, they'll appear strong. But real confidence doesn't come from perfection. It comes from being grounded enough to admit when you don't know something, strong enough to say when something's hard, and clear enough to speak without needing to impress. Pretending to be sure of everything takes energy. Being honest about uncertainty builds trust. Think about someone giving a speech. They forget a point halfway through. One version of confidence would try to cover the mistake, fake a smooth transition, and pretend everything's fine. But the audience often senses the slip. The tension shows up in body language or voice. Now, the speaker feels even more pressure to hide it. Another version of confidence says, "Let me take a second, I lost my place." That moment of honesty resets the room. People lean in, not away. The speaker shows presence, not perfection. This kind of openness doesn't weaken your position, it strengthens it. People trust what feels real. When someone owns a mistake or speaks with uncertainty, it tells others they're not trying to manipulate or control the room. They're just showing up. That's what confidence looks like when it's not propped up by performance. In conversations, the same pattern shows up. A person might avoid hard topics because they fear looking weak. They steer things towards safe ground, nod even when they disagree, and smile to hide discomfort. But over time, the relationship feels thin. It lacks depth. When someone finally says, "I'm not sure how to say this, but here's what's on my mind," the whole tone changes. That moment, full of risk, creates connection. The person didn't sound polished, but they sounded real. Workplace behavior often reflects this paradox. Someone new to a role may think they have to prove themselves by knowing everything. They avoid asking questions. They stay silent in meetings. They try to look capable, but they feel isolated. They miss chances to learn. A more confident person says, "I don't know how that works. Can someone walk me through it?" That admission doesn't lower respect. It raises it. People see the person as honest and engaged. Confidence also includes emotional risk. Telling someone you're nervous before a big event, or admitting that a decision feels heavy, doesn't signal weakness. It shows awareness. It tells others you can feel pressure and still move forward. That kind of balance is rare, and it earns trust. People want to follow someone who can feel and lead at the same time, not someone who acts like they have no doubts. Social media often warps this idea. People post curated versions of success, sharp images, perfect routines, confident captions. It looks like certainty, but behind many of those posts is pressure. The effort to look confident online can make people feel more insecure in real life. They think, Everyone else has it figured out. Why don't I? That comparison erodes self-trust. Real confidence doesn't require an audience. It shows up in quiet moments. It's choosing to rest when you need to, instead of pushing through to impress others. It's saying no when something doesn't feel right, even if it disappoints someone. It's showing up to try something new, knowing you might look foolish. Confidence comes from being okay with those moments, not because they're easy, but because they're honest. It's also shaped by experience. A person gains confidence not by always winning, but by going through failure and realizing they're still standing. Vulnerability plays a role in that process. When you try something and fall short, but admit it, reflect on it, and return stronger, that's where confidence grows. You don't have to pretend the failure didn't happen. You just have to let it teach you. This plays out in leadership as well. A leader who never admits mistakes creates distance. Their team walks on eggshells. A leader who says, "I missed something on that call, and I appreciate you pointing it out," creates safety. That environment leads to better work. People speak up more. They bring forward ideas. They take risks, because the space allows for imperfection. Confidence is often built through relationships. When someone close to you says, "You don't have to prove anything," it creates a foundation. You learn that worth isn't tied to output. That message starts to shape your own voice. You begin to say it to yourself. You stop covering every crack. You let the doubt in without letting it run the show. It's not about sharing everything or turning every moment into a confession. It's about dropping the belief that strength means never bending. Real strength has give. It can absorb discomfort without breaking. That quality comes through when you're willing to be seen, not just for your wins, but for the parts that are still figuring things out. A student who raises their hand to ask a basic question shows more confidence than the one who stays silent to avoid looking unprepared. A manager who says, "I'm still thinking through the answer, but here's what I have so far," shows more command than one who rushes to sound sure. A friend who says, "I don't know what to say, but I'm here," offers more support than one who reaches for a perfect line. The moments that feel shaky often reveal the most. If you can let those moments pass without needing to cover them, you're building something solid. You're not depending on applause or armor. You're standing in who you are, even when it feels unfinished. Confidence that demands constant proof is fragile. Confidence that allows space for vulnerability is steady. You don't need to have all the answers to speak with clarity. You don't need to feel bulletproof to lead. You just need to show up with your whole self, not the edited version. That's what makes people listen. That's what makes your voice matter. ... Someone goes to a new restaurant after reading dozens of glowing reviews. They've seen the pictures, read the menu, and built up the experience in their head. When the food arrives, it's good, but not perfect. The service is fine, the room a little loud. They leave feeling let down. Another person walks in without knowing much about the place. They sit down, order something simple, and enjoy the meal. Same restaurant, same food, completely different experience. That's the expectation paradox. Lower expectations can increase satisfaction, while high expectations often set the stage for disappointment. This isn't about settling or aiming low. It's about understanding how the mind compares outcomes to predictions. The higher the prediction, the smaller the margin for error. If you expect a 10 and get an 8, it feels like a loss. But if you expect a 6 and get an 8, it feels like a win. The experience is the same. The feeling about it changes based on what you thought would happen. This shows up in travel. A person books a trip they've been planning for months. They imagine perfect weather, smooth flights, quiet beaches, and total relaxation. One delay or crowded spot throws them off. They feel frustrated, even though the trip is still going well. Another traveler books a last-minute getaway with no big hopes. They get the same weather and crowds, but enjoy the trip more. They weren't measuring the experience against a fantasy. Expectations shape more than reactions. They shape perception. When you expect a movie to be amazing, you look for reasons to confirm or deny that belief. Every slow scene feels slower. Every weak moment stands out more. When you go in with an open mind, you're more likely to stay with the story as it is. You're watching what's in front of you, not comparing it to an imagined version. High expectations are especially tricky in relationships. Someone enters a new friendship or partnership hoping it will be easy, constant, and emotionally fulfilling. When natural distance or disagreement happens, they feel let down. They may question the whole relationship. Another person starts with fewer assumptions. They expect ups and downs. When friction appears, it doesn't shake them, it just feels normal. The lower expectation creates more room for the real thing to grow. This also plays out in work and goals. A person starts a new job expecting to love every task, feel valued daily, and rise quickly. When the work turns out to be slow or imperfect, they question their choice. Another person expects the usual bumps at the beginning and accepts the learning curve. They adjust faster. Their view of the job isn't shaped by disappointment, it's shaped by reality. Disappointment grows in the gap between what we expect and what we get. That's why some people find more joy in small moments than in big ones. They aren't counting on everything going perfectly. They aren't measuring each hour against a plan. They let things unfold and respond to what happens. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means they're not setting traps for themselves. Marketing and culture often feed this paradox. Ads promise life-changing products. Stories online make other people's lives look ideal. That constant input raises the bar for what we expect from ourselves, our work, and our time. It creates a false normal. When real life doesn't match it, we assume something's wrong. But the problem isn't life, it's the expectation we placed on it. This doesn't mean you shouldn't plan or hope for good things. It means you learn to hold those hopes lightly. You set goals without tying your mood to the outcome. You prepare for a good experience without needing it to be perfect. That shift changes how you feel when plans bend or break. You stop reading every surprise as failure. It's helpful to notice how often you expect things to go a certain way. Sometimes it's subtle. You walk into a day expecting traffic to be light, your coffee order to be right, and every email to make sense. When one thing breaks the pattern, you feel irritated, not because it's a crisis, but because your plan didn't match reality. Lowering the stakes can help. You stop assuming things will go smoothly and start dealing with what shows up. This kind of mental shift doesn't make you passive. It makes you more flexible. You're not ignoring problems. You're responding instead of reacting. You give up the need to control every outcome, which frees up energy to handle real challenges. When something does go well, you feel it more, not because you demanded it, but because you were open to it. In parenting, this paradox is clear. A parent might imagine how a weekend with their child should look: playful, warm, full of laughter. But kids don't follow scripts. They have moods, needs, and meltdowns. The parent who expects perfection may feel frustrated. The one who expects mess and finds one moment of joy feels grateful. The experience didn't change, the lens did. In creative work, expectations can block progress. A writer who expects the first draft to flow perfectly often gets stuck. The pressure to meet a high standard freezes them. Another writer expects the first draft to be rough and just gets words on the page. They enjoy the process more and finish faster. Expecting things to be messy makes it easier to begin. Expectations even affect how we feel about ourselves. If you expect to be productive all the time, then a slow day feels like failure. If you expect to have off days and give yourself room to rest, then the same day feels neutral or even restorative. The way you define success shapes how you respond to anything less. The paradox is that by lowering expectations, you create more space to appreciate what's real. You notice small wins. You stay present. You avoid building up an ideal version of every moment and then tearing it down when reality doesn't match. You stop turning everyday moments into tests you can fail. That's not pessimism, it's clarity. You still hope. You still plan. You just don't let expectation take over your experience. That balance gives you more satisfaction, not less. When things go better than expected, it feels like a gift. When they don't, it feels like life, not a personal failure. You can still aim high without expecting everything to go right. You can still care deeply without clinging to outcomes. That shift in thinking doesn't lower your standards. It gives your goals room to breathe. It lets life surprise you instead of disappoint you. When you expect less, you see more. You notice what's good because you're not busy looking for what's missing. A person wants to make a good impression. They prepare questions, practice jokes, plan their outfit, and rehearse how to greet someone. They show up to a first date or a gathering full of energy, trying their best to be likable. They talk a lot, fill every silence, laugh at everything, agree often, and never stop smiling. But instead of drawing people in, the response feels flat. The person across the table pulls back, looks at their phone, or says they're tired. This is the trying too hard paradox. In social or romantic settings, too much effort to be liked often leads to the opposite result. Trying hard isn't the issue. Intentional effort can be good, but when that effort is rooted in anxiety, it creates pressure, both for the person and the people around them. The conversation doesn't feel natural. It feels managed. Instead of being present, the person is performing. That performance creates distance. Others feel it, even if they can't name it. This shows up in small ways. Someone texts often after a first date, checking in, complimenting, asking to meet again. Their messages sound upbeat, but there's a current of need. They're not just showing interest, they're asking for reassurance. That need can feel heavy. The other person might respond less and less, not because they didn't enjoy the date, but because the follow-up feels urgent, not relaxed. In friendships, this can look like over-apologizing, over-explaining, or offering help constantly. A person might ask, "Are you sure you're okay?" several times in one conversation. Or they might try to steer things towards certain topics to stay in safe territory. These habits often come from a good place. The person wants to connect, but the effort can feel one-sided, even controlling. The room for others to speak, respond, or lead shrinks. The root issue is often fear. Fear of being disliked, of saying the wrong thing, or of being alone. That fear fuels over-effort. The person starts managing not just their behavior, but the other person's reactions. They monitor tone, body language, facial expressions. They try to fill every pause so it doesn't turn into discomfort. But that constant managing creates tension. People can sense when someone is not at ease with themselves. They may not know why, but they feel the gap between what's being said and how it's being said. They might describe the interaction as a bit much, or say it felt like they were trying too hard. That's not a criticism of effort. It's a reflection of how effort can block ease. Attraction often works the other way. People are drawn to calm presence, not performance. They feel comfortable when someone leaves space in the conversation, doesn't rush to impress, and shows interest without pushing. That presence signals confidence, not in a loud or dominant way, but in a quiet way that says, "I'm okay being here as I am." This doesn't mean you should act indifferent or pull back to seem cool. It means you don't need to chase approval in real time. You don't need to impress with every sentence. You don't need to fill every silence. In fact, a little quiet allows connection to settle. It gives both people space to think, feel, and respond honestly. Think of someone who shares a story that's a little awkward or imperfect. They don't rush to fix it or follow it with a joke. They let it land. That kind of honesty can feel refreshing. It shows that they're not trying to win the room, they're just being real. That kind of presence invites others to relax too. In dating, this paradox can shape early interactions. Someone wants to be seen as a good match, so they present an ideal version of themselves. They hide quirks, opinions, or uncertainties, but the other person often senses that the energy isn't grounded. They feel like they're speaking to a script, not a person. Even if everything sounds right, it doesn't feel right. Sometimes people confuse trying hard with being genuine, but authenticity has less to do with effort and more to do with comfort. When someone shares their real opinions, Even if they're unsure, it builds connection. When someone disagrees respectfully or admits they don't know something, it creates trust. Those moments show that the person isn't performing for approval. They're simply being themselves. Trying too hard often creates the opposite of what it seeks. Instead of closeness, it creates a kind of emotional noise. The other person has to sort through the performance to find the person. That takes work. Most people won't do that work, especially early on. They just feel something's off and step away. This also shows up in group settings. Someone trying to fit in might laugh too loudly, agree too often, or tell stories that feel forced. Others may not react directly, but the energy shifts. The group might close ranks without meaning to. It's not that they're rejecting the person, they're responding to the tension. Trying too hard can feel like a demand for attention or approval, and that demand can feel uncomfortable. The paradox is that pulling back just a little often creates more connection. Leaving space for someone else to speak, letting a moment be quiet, or not rushing to prove your value, all of these build ease. You're saying, in effect, I trust that I belong here without having to earn it every second. That kind of calm takes practice. It means letting go of the idea that you can control the outcome of the social moment. You can't make someone like you. You can't guarantee connection. You can only show up, listen, speak when moved, and allow space for the other person to do the same. The less you chase connection, the more space it has to grow. Trying too hard isn't a flaw. It's a response to fear. But fear doesn't need to drive your behavior. Noticing when you're leaning too far forward, talking too much, agreeing too quickly, laughing too loudly can be a helpful signal. It's a moment to pause, breathe, and reset. The people who connect most easily aren't always the most charming or clever. They're often the ones who are most at ease with themselves. They're not pushing to be liked. They're allowing others to find their rhythm. That space builds trust. That trust builds connection. And that connection, when it happens, feels real because no one had to force it. A person starts dating someone new. Things go well in the beginning. They talk often, share details about their lives, and spend more time together. But then one person starts feeling uncertain. They text more often, ask for reassurance, and want to define the relationship quickly. They worry when the other person doesn't respond right away or needs space. What began as closeness turns into pressure. The other person starts pulling back. They feel smothered. What was meant to create connection now creates distance. This is the attachment paradox. The more tightly we cling to relationships, the more we risk pushing others away. Attachment is a natural part of connection. People want to feel close, seen, and valued. But when that need turns into control or constant checking, the dynamic changes. The bond stops feeling mutual. One person begins carrying the weight of holding the relationship together. That imbalance creates tension. It shifts the focus from shared experience to emotional management. This often starts with fear. A person may have experienced loss, betrayal, or neglect in the past. Those experiences shape how they see closeness. When they feel connected to someone, their fear of losing that connection increases. They try to hold on tighter, not because they don't trust the other person, but because they don't trust that good things stay. That fear turns into behavior, frequent messages, repeated questions, or a need for constant reassurance. These actions aren't always dramatic. They can be small but consistent. A person may check in often, ask subtle questions like, "Are we okay?" or "Did I do something wrong?" They may worry when the other person has plans without them. They might interpret delayed replies or changes in tone as signs of trouble. The relationship becomes a place where peace has to be earned over and over again. But relationships can't breathe under pressure. Closeness requires space as much as it requires contact. When one person starts monitoring the other, the relationship stops being about connection and starts being about control. The person on the receiving end may not know how to respond. They may start avoiding honest feedback, to protect the other person's feelings. Or they may pull back entirely, not out of disinterest, but out of discomfort. That reaction often deepens the problem. The person who feels insecure now sees the distance as proof that their fear was right. They may double down, call more, question more, or try harder to win back affection. But that effort usually has the opposite effect. The relationship becomes strained. The other person doesn't feel free to be themselves. They feel watched. And that pressure makes even healthy closeness feel heavy. The fear behind clinging isn't irrational. People want to keep what matters to them, but the way they try to hold on often causes the very thing they fear: disconnection. It's like gripping water. The tighter the grip, the faster it slips through. Relationships need room. That doesn't mean indifference or avoidance. It means trusting the connection enough to let it rest sometimes. In friendships, this shows up too. One person may always initiate, plan, and follow up. They might feel hurt if the other person doesn't respond quickly or put in the same effort. They may start to question the friendship or feel taken for granted. But in some cases, their intensity makes it hard for the other person to step in. When one person fills all the space, the other doesn't feel needed. That's not connection, it's imbalance. In longer relationships, this paradox can show up in more subtle ways. A partner may want to be included in every plan, consulted on every choice, or involved in every conversation. At first, it may feel like closeness, but over time, it can feel like surveillance. The desire to merge turns into a loss of boundaries, and people need boundaries to stay connected. Without them, resentment builds. Healthy attachment includes the ability to tolerate space. That means being okay when the other person is quiet, distracted, or focused elsewhere. It means not reading silence as rejection. It also means not making the relationship responsible for all your emotional needs. When one person depends entirely on another for validation or calm, the relationship becomes a burden instead of a bond. It helps to name the fear without acting from it. Saying, "I feel anxious when I don't hear from you, but I know you're probably just busy," is different from sending 3 texts in a row or demanding answers. That kind of honesty creates space for conversation. It shows the other person that your emotions are real, but that you're handling them. That builds trust, not pressure. This doesn't mean you shouldn't express needs. It means expressing them from a place of stability, not panic. Saying, "I like hearing from you daily, it helps me feel close," is different from saying, "Why didn't you text me yesterday?" One invites connection, the other invites guilt. Relationships grow when both people feel free to come and go. Not in the sense of abandoning each other, but in the sense of having full lives, clear thoughts, and personal space. That freedom allows people to return to each other by choice, not by obligation. When someone feels trusted, they tend to act more trustworthy. When someone feels suffocated, they tend to pull away. Attachment styles often shape this pattern. People with anxious attachment may fear that any distance means rejection. They may interpret normal shifts in closeness as signs of collapse, but often, those shifts are just part of how relationships move. People get busy, distracted, or tired. That doesn't mean the bond is broken. It means life is happening. The work is not to avoid needing others. It's to learn how to need without clinging. That means feeling a wave of fear and choosing to stay steady. It means giving the other person room to breathe, even when you want them close. It means noticing when your actions come from fear, not love. People often say they want closeness, but closeness that feels forced or managed doesn't feel safe. It feels like a demand. The real thing comes from shared experience, not constant reassurance. You don't have to prove your place. You just have to hold it loosely enough to let it grow. Letting go doesn't mean letting someone walk away. It means not holding so tightly that they have to. Trust grows in space. Closeness deepens when it's not chased. You stay connected, not by gripping, but by being solid in yourself and steady with others. The paradox is clear. When you stop clinging, Others can choose to stay. And when they stay by choice, the bond is stronger than anything force could build. A person finishes a project and immediately looks around, waiting for someone to say they did a good job. If no one says anything, they start to worry. Maybe it wasn't good enough. Maybe people didn't notice. They might bring it up again, hint at how hard they worked, or ask directly what others thought. But instead of praise, they get polite nods or silence. The more they seek validation, the less they seem to get. This is the validation paradox. The more you ask for reassurance, the more others tend to hold back. Validation is a basic need. Everyone wants to feel seen, understood, and valued. But when that need becomes constant, it creates pressure. Instead of feeling like connection, it feels like demand. People sense the pull, and many step back. Not because they don't care, but because the situation no longer feels mutual. It feels like a job, to keep filling someone else's emotional tank. This often shows up in conversations. A person might share something personal, then pause and wait. If the listener doesn't respond with praise or warmth right away, the speaker might repeat themselves, explain more, or ask, "Was that okay?" The conversation shifts from sharing to fishing. The focus turns from connection to confirmation. That change in energy can be subtle but strong. The listener may feel boxed in, like they need to perform the right reaction. At work, this pattern shows up in performance. Someone turns in solid work, but instead of trusting the outcome, they follow up repeatedly. They ask, "Was that what you wanted?" Or, "Did I do it right?" They seek compliments, not clarity. Over time, managers or coworkers may respond with less enthusiasm. They start to assume that nothing said will ever feel like enough. So they say less. That silence makes the person seek more. The cycle continues. This doesn't mean the person is doing something wrong. Often, they're reacting to a deeper insecurity, one formed early on. Maybe they learned that love or attention had to be earned. Maybe they grew up in an environment where praise was rare or inconsistent. As adults, they still look outside themselves to know they're okay. That's not weakness, it's habit. But the way others respond to constant validation seeking creates a gap. People may feel that no amount of reassurance will land. They may start holding back to avoid feeding a pattern that feels unsatisfying for everyone involved. Or they may withdraw because the interaction starts to feel less about shared experience and more about emotional labor. Romantic relationships reveal this clearly. One partner may ask often, "Do you love me?" Or, "Are you sure everything's okay?" At first, the other partner responds with care. But over time, those questions feel heavy. They no longer come across as loving. They come across as anxious demands. The partner may pull away, not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. The person who needed closeness now feels even more alone. Social media reflects this too. People post updates, selfies, or achievements. They check likes, read comments, and feel good when feedback rolls in. But if the response slows down or drops off, they feel deflated. They might post more or share more personal content, hoping for a reaction. But followers often sense the shift. What once felt fun now feels like pressure. Engagement drops. Again, the need for validation creates its opposite. This isn't about silence or isolation. Everyone needs feedback. The issue is how much weight is placed on it. If your sense of worth relies entirely on what others say, then you're always vulnerable. You lose your center. You wait to hear that you're good enough instead of knowing it on your own. Ironically, people tend to offer more validation to those who don't seem to need it. When someone is grounded and steady, others feel freer to give praise. There's no pressure. The compliment lands easily because it's not being pulled for. It feels like a gift, not an obligation. That ease invites warmth. Confidence plays a role here, but not the loud kind. It's quiet. It shows up as a person who doesn't need applause to keep going. They're open to feedback, but not ruled by it. They might say, "I'm proud of this," instead of asking, "What do you think?" That self-trust draws others in. People respond more because they're not being asked to fix or rescue. In friendships, this looks like someone who shares without expectation. They might say something vulnerable, then move on. They're not watching the other person's face for approval. That relaxed energy creates space. The friend feels free to respond without pressure. The bond grows stronger because it's based on presence, not performance. To shift out of the paradox, it helps to notice when validation becomes a pattern, not a moment. One sign is needing the same kind of reassurance over and over. Another is feeling empty unless someone confirms your worth. That doesn't make you needy. It means something inside is asking for attention. But the real answer often comes from within, not from others. This doesn't mean shutting people out or pretending you don't care. It means learning to carry more of your own self-worth. When you say, "I like what I did," and let that be enough, you give others room to agree without being responsible for your peace. That shift creates freedom on both sides. It also helps to practice giving what you seek. If you want to feel seen, start by seeing others. If you want to feel appreciated, express that appreciation. Not to get something back, but to show that validation flows both ways. That mutual exchange feels better than chasing approval. Validation that's freely given feels good. Validation that's pulled for feels strained. People don't withhold it out of malice. They step back because they feel the weight of always having to lift someone else's worth. When you trust yourself more, others don't feel that weight. They step forward. They speak up. They tell you what you hope to hear, not because they had to, but because it felt right to. A person feels anxious before speaking in front of a group. Their heart races, hands sweat, and their mind fills with worst-case scenarios. They decide to back out. The fear goes away, for now. But the next time a similar situation comes up, the fear returns, stronger than before. This is the fear paradox. Avoiding fear seems like the safest choice in the moment, but it often makes the fear grow. Facing it directly is what helps it shrink. Fear is part of how the brain protects you. It alerts you to danger, both real and imagined. But the brain doesn't always know the difference. If you treat something as a threat, like public speaking, flying, or setting a boundary, your mind records it that way. Avoiding the situation confirms the fear. Your brain says, "That was dangerous. Good thing we ran." The next time, the signal is louder. This is how phobias take root. Someone has one bad experience with a dog. They avoid dogs after that. Over time, their fear spreads. They cross the street when they see a dog. They avoid parks. They feel tense watching movies with dogs. The original fear might have been mild, but the avoidance turned it into a rule. All dogs are a problem. The brain doesn't unlearn that unless it's shown otherwise. Avoidance gives short-term relief and long-term cost. It feels good to skip the thing that scares you. But every time you avoid it, you strengthen the belief that you can't handle it. Your confidence drops. Your options shrink. Your fear begins to shape your choices, not your values. Take social anxiety. A person feels nervous at parties or meetings. They stay quiet or skip events entirely. They avoid eye contact and let others do the talking. Each time they avoid speaking, the fear becomes more familiar. It starts to feel like part of who they are. "I'm just not a social person," they say. But the fear is learned, not fixed. If they face it in small ways, asking one question, joining a small group, they start to rewrite the story. The fear doesn't vanish, but it loses its grip. Fear shrinks through exposure. That doesn't mean forcing yourself into the worst-case scenario. It means stepping into discomfort with care and repetition. A person afraid of elevators might start by standing near one, then riding one floor, then staying on for longer trips. With each step, their brain sees that nothing bad happened. The fear signal weakens. Avoidance told the brain the elevator was a threat. Exposure tells it the opposite. This also shows up with emotional fear. Someone avoids hard conversations about money, commitment, or disappointment. They tell themselves it's better not to stir things up. But the silence builds tension. Resentment grows. When the conversation finally happens, it's explosive. The fear of discomfort created more discomfort. Facing the issue earlier could have led to a calm, honest talk. Fear avoided became fear fulfilled. Performance fear works the same way. An athlete who fears failure may avoid tough competitions. A writer afraid of criticism may avoid publishing. A student afraid of bad grades may avoid challenging courses. All of these choices protect the person from short-term stress, but they also block growth. Facing fear in these settings is how people improve, not by erasing fear, but by acting through it. Children learn this early. A child scared of the dark might ask for the light to stay on. At first, that helps, but if the light always stays on, the fear never gets tested. The child never finds out they can sleep through the night without it. Gradual exposure, leaving the door open, dimming the light, then turning it off, helps them learn that the dark itself isn't dangerous. Adults often forget that fear can be trained. They believe that if they're scared, something must be wrong. But fear is not always a signal to stop. Sometimes it's a signal to pay attention. Sometimes it means you're near something important, change, growth, or truth. Running from it turns it into something bigger than it is. Facing it often shows it for what it is, a wave that rises and falls. Facing fear doesn't require courage in the dramatic sense. It requires staying still long enough to see that you can handle it. Someone with panic attacks might believe they're about to pass out or die. But if they stay with the sensation without fighting it, just breathing, noticing, allowing, it starts to fade. Their heart still races, but their fear of the fear drops. That shift breaks the cycle. Therapists often use this approach in exposure-based treatment. A person makes a list of feared situations and tackles them one by one. They rate their anxiety before and after. Over time, the anxiety drops, not because the situation changed, but because the person's belief about it did. They stop seeing fear as a stop sign and start seeing it as a hill to climb. This can be done without formal therapy too. Someone afraid of rejection might practice asking for small things, a favor, a discount, a seat change. Most people will say yes or no without drama. That practice builds resilience. The fear of rejection fades because the consequences turn out to be manageable. The same applies to inner fears. Fear of not being good enough, fear of being alone, fear of making the wrong choice. Avoiding these fears leads to perfectionism, people-pleasing, or indecision. Facing them means saying, maybe I'll fail and I'll still be okay. That kind of internal exposure builds strength. You stop needing to control everything to feel safe. People often say they'll face fear when they feel ready. But readiness doesn't come first. Action comes first. Confidence follows. The fear may still be there, but it doesn't control the wheel. You act not because you're fearless, but because you've stopped running. The paradox is clear. Avoiding fear gives it power. Facing fear takes it apart. Not all at once, not forever, but enough to move forward. The goal isn't to erase fear. It's to build a life where fear isn't in charge. You do that by turning toward it, not away. One step at a time, one breath at a time, until what once felt impossible becomes something you've already done. A person feels a wave of doubt. Maybe it's about their health, their relationship, or a decision they just made. The discomfort grows, so they ask someone close to them for reassurance. Do you think I'm okay? Or, are you sure you're not upset with me? Or, I made the right call, right? The other person answers kindly. Yes, you're fine. The relief comes, but only for a moment. The doubt returns, sometimes stronger. The person asks again in a slightly different way. The same cycle repeats. This is the reassurance paradox. The more you seek reassurance, the less reassured you feel over time. Reassurance works like a drug. It gives short-term comfort, but the effect wears off quickly. You start to depend on it to feel calm. When the feeling of doubt or anxiety returns, and it always does, you go looking for the fix again. The brain learns that the only way to settle fear is to ask someone else. That habit builds quickly. What starts as a coping tool becomes a crutch. This shows up clearly in health anxiety. Someone notices a small ache or bump and begins to worry. They search online, ask friends, or schedule unnecessary doctor visits. The doctor says nothing is wrong. For a day or two, they feel better. Then a new sensation starts the worry again. They don't trust the past answer. They want a fresh one. No amount of logic quiets the fear because the need for reassurance keeps growing. It works the same way in relationships. A person might ask their partner daily, "Do you still love me?" Or "Are we okay?" The first few times, the answer soothes. But after a while, the questions begin to carry weight. They stop sounding like care and start sounding like fear. The partner may answer with patience, but the emotional tone shifts. The person asking doesn't feel better. They feel less sure. Even in moments of real connection, they question whether it's real or enough. Reassurance seeking can be internal too. A person might replay past conversations to make sure they didn't say the wrong thing. They might go over decisions repeatedly, trying to confirm they chose correctly. But no amount of review brings peace. The mind keeps looking for absolute certainty. And because life rarely gives perfect clarity, the reassurance loop keeps going. This cycle can lead to dependence. A person starts leaning on others to manage feelings they could learn to tolerate on their own. That dependence puts strain on relationships. Friends and partners want to help, but over time, they may feel responsible for managing someone else's anxiety. They may begin to pull back, not out of coldness, but because the support starts to feel like a job. That response makes the person seeking reassurance feel even more anxious. Why are they being distant? Did I do something wrong? Are they tired of me? They ask again. The partner responds, possibly with less energy or more frustration. The reassurance doesn't land. It feeds the doubt. The cycle tightens. The urge to seek reassurance comes from a good place. People want to feel safe, wanted, and sure. But reassurance doesn't solve the underlying fear. It only covers it for a while. Real peace comes not from hearing the right answer, but from learning to sit with uncertainty. This doesn't mean you can't ask for support. It means recognizing when the question is about connection versus when it's about control. If ye ask, "How was that for you?" after sharing something vulnerable, you're opening a door. If you ask, "Are you sure you're not mad?" 3 times in 1 hour, you're trying to manage your own fear by managing someone else's response. One way to break the loop is to pause before asking. Ask yourself what you hope the answer will fix. If it's a temporary feeling of doubt or discomfort, consider waiting. Let the feeling rise. Notice it. Name it. Then let it pass on its own. The more you sit with uncertainty, the more you learn that it doesn't break you. It's just a wave. Another approach is to delay the question. If you feel the urge to ask someone something you've asked many times before, set a timer. Tell yourself, "I'll wait 10 minutes. In that space, breathe. Move your body. Change your environment. Often, the need to ask fades on its own. If it doesn't, you can still ask, but now it's a choice, not a reflex. Journaling can help too. Writing down the worry gives it shape. You might notice patterns. How often the same doubt shows up, how quickly reassurance fades, how your questions shift, but the feeling stays the same. That awareness helps you step outside the loop. In some cases, the root of the need is a deeper belief. I'm not safe unless someone tells me I am, or I'm not lovable unless someone says I am. Reassurance can't fix that belief. It can only distract from it. Working with a therapist or doing personal reflection can help address the root. Changing those beliefs doesn't mean you stop needing people. It means you stop needing them to carry all your emotional weight. Letting go of reassurance doesn't mean pushing people away. It means allowing their words to land once, without needing them to repeat themselves. It means learning to offer that same reassurance to yourself, even when your inner voice is uncertain. You begin to say, "I don't feel sure right now," and that's okay. That shift is quiet, but it's powerful. It creates room for real confidence to grow. Some people worry that if they stop asking, they'll feel worse, but most find the opposite. The first few days may be hard. The urge to ask will spike. But over time, something changes. They feel steadier. They start to trust that doubt can come and go without controlling them. They begin to notice other signs of safety, kindness in tone, presence in action, without needing words to confirm it every time. Reassurance is not wrong. It becomes a problem when it's constant, when it's the only tool used to calm fear, and when it leaves the person feeling less sure instead of more. And the more you do that, the harder it is to believe the answer when it comes. Building tolerance for uncertainty is slow, but worth it. It frees you from the trap of needing someone else to fix what only you can hold. That shift isn't loud or dramatic. It shows up quietly. When you feel doubt, hear it and choose not to chase the answer. And then the silence, instead of being scary, starts to feel like peace. A person sits alone after a long day and starts thinking about a conversation they had earlier. They replay what they said, how they said it, the expression on the other person's face. They wonder if they came across the wrong way. They try to remember the tone, the pauses, the response. Then they think about what it means, about them, their relationships, how they communicate. The thoughts start small, but spiral. What began as self-reflection turns into doubt. This is the self-awareness paradox. Looking inward can help you understand yourself better, but it can also lead to overthinking and insecurity. Self-awareness is often described as a strength. It helps people learn from their actions, understand their habits, and improve how they move through the world. But like any tool, it becomes harmful when used too much. When someone constantly scans their own behavior, they stop living in the moment and start managing themselves as if from the outside. They become hyper-aware. Every thought or feeling becomes a puzzle to solve. This shows up in conversations. Someone says something, then immediately wonders, "Did that sound weird?" Or, "Was that too much?" Instead of listening to the reply, they watch the other person's face for clues. They don't hear the conversation, they analyze it. This can make them feel disconnected from others and from themselves. They're not present. They're busy measuring. People who spend a lot of time thinking about themselves often want to improve. They don't want to hurt others, make mistakes, or be misunderstood. They ask, "Why did I react like that?" Or, "What does that say about me?" Those questions can be useful, but without limits, they become loops. The same thoughts circle without new answers. The person becomes less sure, not more. Perfectionists often fall into this pattern. They believe that enough reflection will remove all flaws, that if they can just think it through enough, they'll act perfectly next time. But life isn't that neat. People are complex, emotions are messy, and some answers don't come from thinking. They come from doing, observing, and adjusting over time. Self-awareness also becomes a trap when it turns into self-judgment. A person might notice they felt jealous or impatient, then decide they're selfish or broken. Instead of saying that feeling makes sense, they say, "What's wrong with me?" The goal shifts from understanding to fixing. They treat every emotion like a problem to solve, not an experience to hold. In therapy and coaching, this often comes up. Clients who are highly self-aware can name every thought and feeling. They see patterns, know their past, and understand their triggers. But they struggle to act. They know too much. Every option feels like it needs a deep explanation. Every decision feels heavy. They stay stuck in reflection instead of taking the next step. There's also a social cost. People who reflect deeply may assume others do the same. They overread silence or short replies. They fill in gaps with their own stories, usually negative ones. She hasn't replied because I said the wrong thing. He's quiet because I was too intense. Often the truth is simpler, but high self-awareness, when unbalanced, turns uncertainty into self-blame. This can even show up in creativity. A writer may stop mid-sentence, questioning if the voice is right. A musician may delete a melody before finishing it, unsure if it's original enough. The inner critic grows louder the more you examine your own thoughts. Reflection without boundaries makes expression feel risky. But the solution isn't to stop thinking. It's to use self-awareness with structure. One way to do this is time-limited reflection. Set a moment in the day to check in. Ask what worked, what didn't, what felt off. Keep it short, then move on. Don't turn every moment into analysis. Another approach is shifting the question. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" try, "What was I feeling in that moment?" That small change moves you from judgment to curiosity. You learn something instead of criticizing yourself. Action helps too. When you notice a pattern, like always second-guessing texts or apologizing for no reason, practice doing something different. Don't wait to feel ready. Try the change. Let experience give you feedback. Some answers don't come from the inside. They come from how the world responds to what you do. It also helps to check your motives. Are you reflecting to grow or to control how others see you? If it's the second, the self-awareness won't help. It will only add pressure. You'll keep thinking about how to seem right instead of how to feel right. People often confuse self-awareness with self-control. They think the more they understand themselves, the more they can manage how they show up. But trying to control every move, word, and feeling doesn't lead to growth. It leads to anxiety. Growth comes from letting yourself be human, noticing what happens, and making room for change without judgment. There's a quiet strength in letting some questions stay unanswered. In saying, "I don't know why I felt that, and that's okay for now." Not everything needs a label. Not every reaction needs a cause. Letting go of that need doesn't make you less aware. It gives your awareness room to breathe. Relationships also benefit from this shift. When someone shares a hard feeling with you, you don't have to dissect your role right away. You can listen. You can be present. If reflection is needed, it can come later, once emotions have settled. Immediate overanalysis often blocks connection. People don't want your analysis. They want your presence. Self-awareness, when used well, builds trust with yourself and with others, but only when it's paired with self-kindness and restraint. Thinking clearly requires knowing when to stop thinking. Not everything needs to be solved. Some things just need to be lived. The paradox is real. The more you reflect, the more you may uncover. But the more you uncover, the easier it is to get lost in your own mind. The key is to balance reflection with action, insight with self-acceptance, and analysis with rest. When that balance is in place, self-awareness becomes a tool, not a trap. Someone sits alone at home on a Friday night. Their phone is within reach. They think about texting a friend or making a call, but the idea feels heavy. What would they say? What if the friend is busy? What if it feels awkward? They tell themselves they'll reach out later. Instead, they scroll for hours and feel worse. This is the loneliness paradox. The lonelier someone feels, the harder it becomes to connect with others, which only deepens the feeling of being alone. Loneliness isn't the same as being alone. Some people spend long stretches without others and feel fine. Others can feel lonely in a crowded room. Loneliness is about disconnection, not just from people, but from the sense of being known and understood. When that disconnection grows, it feeds on itself. The longer it lasts, the more effort it takes to break through. At first, someone might feel a simple need for company. They notice they miss having regular conversations, or they wish someone would check in. But when no one does, that feeling turns into doubt. They start to wonder if people care. They look back at old interactions for clues. Maybe they were too distant. Maybe they weren't interesting enough. Maybe they're just not the kind of person others reach out to. That doubt starts shaping behavior. Instead of texting a friend, they wait to see if the friend will text first. Instead of asking someone to meet, they tell themselves it would be a bother. They don't stop wanting connection. They just stop believing they have the right to ask for it. The longer they wait, the heavier that silence feels. And what started as a passing need turns into a state of being. This shows up in small ways. A person in a group chat stays quiet for weeks. They see the messages, but don't chime in. When they think about rejoining, they worry it will seem random. So they wait for a moment that feels natural. It doesn't come. The silence grows. Or someone skips a social gathering because they feel out of place. Later, they regret it, but the next invitation feels even harder to accept. Loneliness also changes how people interpret things. A delayed reply feels like rejection. A short message feels like disinterest. When someone cancels plans, it feels personal, even if the reason is valid. The lonely brain starts seeing every gap in connection as evidence that something is wrong with them. That belief makes reaching out feel risky, but not reaching out feels worse. The paradox lies in the loop. The more isolated you feel, the more you assume others won't want to hear from you. That assumption keeps you silent, which keeps you isolated. To break the loop, you need to act against the feeling. That's hard. It takes effort to say hello when you expect no reply. It takes nerve to ask someone to talk when you fear you'll be a burden. But those small acts make a difference. Some people try to fix loneliness by appearing fine. They post smiling photos, answer good when asked how they are, and play the role of someone who's socially connected. They think if they look okay, connection will come naturally. But it often doesn't. People assume they're doing well. The gap between how they appear and how they feel gets wider. That's another form of loneliness, being around people who don't know you're struggling. There's also shame. Many people believe loneliness means something is wrong with them. They think if they were better at relationships, they wouldn't feel this way. That belief makes them hide. But loneliness isn't a failure. It's a signal. It tells you that something important is missing. Responding to that signal with judgment makes it louder. Responding with care makes it manageable. Even small interactions can help. A brief check-in with a neighbor, a message to someone you haven't spoken to in months, a short conversation with a coworker or barista. These moments don't fix deep loneliness, but they break the cycle of silence. They remind you that connection doesn't have to be perfect or profound. It just has to be real. People often underestimate how much others welcome connection. They assume they'll be ignored or dismissed, but most people are open to hearing from someone they know, even if it's been a while. A message that says, "Hey, I've been quiet lately, but I'd love to catch up," is more likely to be met with warmth than avoidance. And if it isn't, that response isn't proof you're unworthy. It just means they weren't available. Loneliness also improves when you stop tying all connection to big outcomes. You don't need every conversation to lead to a deep friendship. You don't need every hangout to be long or meaningful. The goal isn't to fix loneliness in one move. It's to interrupt it, to open a door, even a little, to remind yourself that reaching out doesn't require perfection. It also helps to shift focus outward. When you feel disconnected, look for someone else who might be feeling the same. Send a kind note, ask how someone's doing, offer a small gesture of care. These acts don't just help the other person, they help you remember that you still have something to give. That giving can restore a sense of purpose, even when receiving feels hard. Loneliness can also live in close relationships. You might have a partner, family, or friends, but still feel unseen. In those cases, the reach is inward. It means saying, "I've been feeling a little distant," or "Can we talk more about what's going on with us?" That's not easy. But silence in those spaces doesn't protect the relationship. It drains it. The longer the distance lasts, the harder it is to close. Breaking the loneliness loop doesn't mean becoming social all the time. It means becoming brave enough to act before you feel ready. It means trusting that one text, one call, or one honest moment can change the shape of a day, not because it solves everything, but because it breaks the silence. That silence is where loneliness grows, and only action breaks it. The paradox is clear. The lonelier you feel, the more your mind tells you to wait. But waiting makes the loneliness worse. The only way out is through a risk. The risk of being ignored, the risk of feeling awkward, the risk of being seen. That risk is real, but so is the reward. Because most of the time, the response is kinder than you expected. Most of the time, the door you feared was closed was only waiting to be knocked on. Two people start seeing each other. The conversation flows, the time spent together feels easy, and there's a pull towards something deeper. But after a while, one person hesitates. They start holding back. They share fewer personal thoughts, avoid bringing up anything that feels too raw or complicated. They laugh instead of opening up. The other person senses the wall, but doesn't know why it's there. What began as potential closeness now feels stuck. This is the intimacy paradox. Vulnerability is what creates closeness, but the fear of being vulnerable is often what keeps people from getting close. Intimacy isn't about dramatic confession. It's about being seen, fully, without filter. That includes sharing fears, needs, doubts, and hopes. But that kind of honesty carries risk. You might be misunderstood. You might be judged. You might not get the response you want, so people protect themselves. They keep things surface level or stay in safe emotional zones. But the very thing they avoid, showing up honestly, is what would build the connection they want. This shows up in early relationships. Someone may enjoy spending time together, but struggle to say what they feel. They wait for the other person to make the first move, say "I like you," or show affection. They act casual to avoid looking too eager. But behind that calm surface is uncertainty. If both people do this, the relationship stalls. No one wants to go first, so nothing real gets shared. In long-term relationships, the pattern shifts. A couple might go months or years without having a serious conversation about how they're doing emotionally. They talk about schedules, meals, work, or family, but not about how they feel in the relationship. If one partner is struggling, they might drop hints or express frustration in sideways ways, being distant, picking fights, or withdrawing. They don't say, "I feel disconnected," because that feels too raw. But the silence creates more distance, not less. People avoid vulnerability for different reasons. Some have been hurt before. They shared something important once and were laughed at, dismissed, or ignored. Others grew up in environments where feelings weren't discussed. They learned to stay quiet, to keep it all inside. Some people tie their self-worth to being seen as strong or unbothered. For them, admitting uncertainty feels like weakness. Whatever the reason, the habit forms. Don't show too much. Don't need too much. Don't let anyone too close. But closeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from honesty. When you share a fear or a doubt and the other person hears it without pulling away, that builds trust. When you say, "I don't have it all figured out," and someone stays, that's what intimacy looks like. It's not the absence of fear, it's the choice to be real anyway. Vulnerability also doesn't always land smoothly. Sometimes people do get quiet or awkward when you open up, but most of the time, their reaction says more about them than about you. And even when it's messy, the act of being honest still has value. You stop performing and start showing up as yourself. That shift creates room for others to do the same. A common fear is that being vulnerable will scare others away, that if you show your flaws, they'll lose interest. So you polish the edges. You present the version of yourself that's easiest to like. But people don't connect to perfection. They connect to realness. They connect to the moment when someone says, "I was nervous to tell you this," or "Sometimes I don't know how to say what I feel." That shared uncertainty is what makes closeness possible. Some people wait for the perfect moment to open up. They want to feel 100% safe before they say anything real. But safety often comes after, not before, vulnerability. You build it by risking a little, seeing how the other person responds, and continuing from there. It's a back and forth. You go first, a little, then they go. Trust grows that way, one shared truth at a time. It's also important to notice when fear of vulnerability gets disguised. Some people use humor, charm, or storytelling to stay in control. They're entertaining, but never exposed. Others stay busy, working long hours, always having plans, so there's no time to connect deeply. Some people focus on the other person's feelings and needs, so they never have to name their own. These strategies protect them from discomfort, but keep intimacy out of reach. Being vulnerable doesn't mean oversharing. It's not about unloading everything all at once. It's about timing, context, and intention. You can be honest without overwhelming the other person. You can say, "This is hard for me to talk about, but I want to try," and then pause. You don't have to say everything. You just have to say something that's real. Closeness deepens when someone feels like they're seeing the real you, not just the version you think they want. That might mean saying, "I get quiet when I feel anxious," or "I sometimes struggle to believe people care about me." These are simple truths, but they open doors. They let the other person meet you in a deeper place. Sometimes, being vulnerable also means asking for what you need, not in a demanding way, but in a clear one. Saying, "It would help me to hear from you more during the week," or "I feel more connected when we have quiet time together," isn't weak. It's honest. It gives the other person a chance to respond in a way that builds the bond. Avoiding vulnerability doesn't make the need for intimacy disappear. It just makes it harder to reach. You can't connect deeply while keeping a wall up, and most people can sense when someone is holding back. They may not know why, but they feel the gap. That gap is what keeps relationships polite instead of close, pleasant instead of meaningful. When someone finally shares something real, even something small, it often changes the entire tone of a relationship. It gives permission. The other person feels safer to open up too. That shift doesn't require a big moment. It can start with something as simple as, "This is hard to say, but I want to try." That small risk builds something stronger than any performance ever could. The paradox is that people want closeness, but often avoid the very thing that creates it. They wait for safety instead of building it. They protect themselves from pain, but also block connection. Intimacy begins when someone decides to stop hiding, not because they're fearless, but because they're ready to be known. That decision opens the door to everything they've been hoping to find. Someone walks into a job interview. Before they say a word, they're already aware of being watched. They adjust how they sit, how they smile, even how they breathe. They want to seem relaxed, but the effort makes them feel stiff. Every gesture feels forced. Every silence feels loud. Instead of showing up naturally, they start performing. This is the observer paradox. The more you try to act natural while being observed, the more unnatural you become. This dynamic happens all the time. People act differently when they know they're being watched by a camera, a stranger, or even a close friend. They speak more carefully, move with more intention, or try to manage how they appear. The pressure to just be yourself becomes its own kind of stress. You end up watching yourself instead of being yourself. Social media makes this worse. Even casual moments start to feel like performances. Someone laughs at a joke, then wonders how it came across on video. A group takes a photo, and suddenly everyone adjusts their posture and face. What was spontaneous becomes curated. The presence of an audience, real or imagined, changes behavior. This also shows up in everyday conversations. A person who usually jokes around might become quiet in a group, not because they don't have anything to say, but because they're aware of every word. They don't want to offend, sound strange, or be judged. So they filter everything. The result is silence, or a version of themselves that doesn't feel honest. The observer paradox affects self-presentation in subtle ways. You may speak slower, pause more, or use safer language. You might agree more than you mean to, or smile when you don't feel like it. These shifts may seem small, but over time, they add up. People stop seeing who you are and start seeing who you think they want, and you begin to feel less known. There's also the internal version of this. You observe yourself. You track how you're doing in real time. Was that too much? Do I sound confident? Should I say more? This kind of self-monitoring splits your attention. Half of you is in the moment. The other half is managing the moment. That split makes genuine interaction harder. In dating, this plays out often. Two people try to connect, but both are focused on how they're being perceived. They think, am I interesting enough? Or do I seem calm? Instead of asking, am I enjoying this person? The date becomes a mirror instead of a meeting. Each person is watching themselves perform. In classrooms, students who know they're being evaluated may hesitate to raise their hands, not because they don't know the answer, but because they're unsure how it will land. Fear of being judged makes participation feel risky. Even students who usually speak freely may freeze under observation. The paradox isn't limited to formal settings. It happens in friendships and families. Someone who's told often to just relax may feel even more pressure. The reminder that they're being watched, even kindly, can trigger more self-consciousness. They become careful, not comfortable. Trying to be natural is like trying to fall asleep on command. The more you try, the harder it gets. The same goes for presence. If you're working to appear at ease, you're not at ease. You're managing impressions. That effort pulls you out of the moment and into your head. One way to ease the effect is to shift focus. Instead of thinking, how am I doing? Try asking, what's happening around me? Look at the room, listen to the sounds, engage with the people. When your attention moves outward, self-consciousness often drops. You're no longer the main character. You're just part of the scene. Another approach is naming the tension. Saying, I always get nervous in these situations, or I'm overthinking everything right now, doesn't make you look weak. It often makes others relax. They've felt that way too. Naming it brings the pressure down. You stop hiding the discomfort, which often makes it fade. Practice helps. The more often you speak up in group settings, record yourself, or move through awkward moments, the less power the observer effect holds. You stop reacting to the feeling of being seen and start getting used to it. It doesn't mean the nerves go away. It means they stop controlling you. It also helps to notice how you act when no one's watching. That's the baseline. That's the version of you that isn't filtered or edited. The goal isn't to replicate it perfectly in public, but to move closer to it. Not polished, not perfect, just honest. Perfectionism feeds the observer paradox. If you believe you have to come across a certain way, you'll over-monitor. You'll rehearse lines, smooth emotions, and manage your image. But most people don't connect to perfect. They connect to something that feels real. A pause, a laugh, even a moment of confusion can make you more relatable, not less. Sometimes the fear behind the observer effect comes from past experiences. Maybe someone laughed at you when you spoke up. Maybe you were criticized for being too much or too quiet. Those moments leave a mark. You start to pre-correct for criticism that hasn't happened yet. You perform safety instead of seeking it. But it's worth remembering that most people are too busy thinking about themselves to judge you closely. They're wondering how they come across, just like you. Realizing that can lighten the weight of being observed. You're not on stage. You're just in the room. The observer paradox is part of being human. Awareness changes behavior. But awareness isn't the problem. Fear is. The fear of judgment, rejection, or not being enough. Once you name that fear, you can work with it. You can choose to act anyway, not perfectly, not fearlessly, but freely enough. Freedom comes not from avoiding observation, but from learning to stay steady while being seen. You don't need to be natural. You just need to be present. That presence, even if shaky, is what draws people in. It's what makes moments feel real. And it's what helps you feel like yourself again, even while someone else is watching. A person finishes a task they've never done before. It felt easy, and they're proud of the result. They assume they must be pretty good at it, even better than average. Another person, with years of experience doing that same task, looks at their own work and notices every flaw. They hesitate to speak with confidence because they know how much they still don't know. This is the Dunning-Kruger Effect. People who lack skill often overestimate their ability, while people with real expertise tend to underestimate theirs. It's not about intelligence, it's about awareness. When you don't know much about a subject, you also don't know what you don't know. That blind spot gives a false sense of confidence. Tasks seem simple, concepts feel clear, answers appear obvious. So the person speaks and acts with certainty. But as skill increases, so does awareness of the field's complexity. The expert begins to see nuance, uncertainty, and exceptions. They hesitate, not because they know less, but because they understand more. This creates a paradox of confidence. In many settings, the loudest voice isn't the most informed, it's the most unaware. In meetings, the person who speaks with absolute certainty may have the shallowest grasp of the topic. Meanwhile, someone with deep knowledge sits back, carefully weighing their words. From the outside, it may look like the confident speaker is the expert, but confidence without competence is often just ignorance in disguise. Take learning a new language. A beginner might learn a few phrases and feel fluent. They speak freely, mispronounce words, and use grammar incorrectly without noticing. They feel proud, even bold. But someone who has studied for years may hesitate to speak. They know the rules, the exceptions, the tones, and the gaps in their own vocabulary. They feel limited because they can see the full picture. Their silence doesn't reflect weakness, it reflects understanding. In the workplace, this pattern can distort how people are perceived. A junior employee who speaks boldly may be seen as a rising star. They present their ideas with energy and clarity, at least on the surface. But their suggestions might lack depth. A more seasoned colleague might offer fewer ideas but with more accuracy, if the room values volume over substance. The confident novice gets attention while the expert gets overlooked. This effect can also influence leadership. Some people seek authority not because they understand the role, but because they believe they do. They may rise quickly, impressing others with their assurance. But once in charge, their lack of true understanding shows. They avoid feedback, double down on mistakes, or blame others. In contrast, a thoughtful leader may appear hesitant. They ask questions, admit when they're unsure, and take time before making decisions. They understand the stakes. That humility makes them stronger, but it may be mistaken for doubt. Academic settings also show this clearly. A student who skims the material may feel ready for the test. They recognize terms and assume they grasp the concepts, but during the test, their understanding collapses. Another student who studied in detail may feel anxious. They've seen how one question can have layers. They know where their knowledge ends. That anxiety doesn't mean they're unprepared. It means they're aware of the challenge. Social situations carry the same pattern. Someone with limited insight into social dynamics may believe they're a great communicator. They interrupt, dominate conversations, or give advice without asking. They don't notice the discomfort they create. Another person, more sensitive to cues and tone, may overthink every word. They notice every shift in energy. They worry about saying too much. Their awareness of others makes them cautious. It doesn't mean they're less skilled. It means they're more tuned in. The Dunning-Kruger Effect also affects how people give feedback. The overconfident person may speak with certainty about things they barely understand. They offer critique without context. The experienced person may hesitate to correct others unless asked directly. They remember what it was like to know less. They respect the learning curve. This patience can be mistaken for passivity, but often it's a form of wisdom. In creative work, beginners often feel free. They make bold choices, mix styles, break rules, sometimes by accident. That freedom can lead to interesting results, but it can also lead to overconfidence. They may not see the flaws yet. The skilled artist sees every detail that could be sharper. They question whether the piece is good enough. Their humility grows with their skill. One reason this paradox matters is that confidence is persuasive. In group settings, people often look to those who speak first and speak loudest. That can push out quieter voices, even when those voices have more to offer. The danger isn't just that the wrong person gets attention. It's that good ideas stay hidden because the person holding them isn't sure they're worth sharing. This doesn't mean people should stay quiet until they're experts. It means knowing that confidence is not always proof of accuracy. It means asking, what does this person actually know? Not just how sure do they sound. It means listening for substance, not just tone. It also means being patient with your own growth. Early confidence can feel good, but it fades when real learning begins. That moment, when you go from "I've got this" to "this is bigger than I thought," is a turning point. Some people quit there. They don't like the feeling of uncertainty. But if you stay with it, your skill deepens. Your humility becomes part of your strength. Over time, real confidence feels quieter. It's less about being right and more about staying curious. It shows up in someone who says, "I don't know for sure, but here's what I've seen," or "That's not my area, what do you think?" These aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of depth. People who understand the limits of their knowledge are more likely to seek truth, admit mistakes, and keep learning. The Dunning-Kruger Effect reminds us to separate style from substance, to value thoughtful answers over quick ones, to ask what someone has done, not just how they talk about it, and to stay aware of the gap between what feels certain and what's actually known. That gap is where growth happens, if you're willing to see it. You walk into a room and feel every eye on you. Maybe your shirt has a small stain. Maybe you tripped a little on the way in. You sit down, trying to act normal, but part of your brain is convinced that everyone noticed. You think they're judging, whispering, or at least quietly remembering your mistake. Later, you replay the moment, still feeling the heat of embarrassment. But the truth is, most people didn't notice at all. And if they did, they forgot it within seconds. This is the spotlight effect, the belief that people are watching you far more closely than they actually are. The spotlight effect is a common mental habit. It happens because your own thoughts and actions are vivid in your mind. You notice every detail about yourself, how you look, what you say, how you move. It feels like others must notice too, but they don't. They're too busy thinking about their own actions, their own insecurities, their own internal spotlights. Just like you, this bias isn't a sign of vanity, it's part of how attention works. Your own experiences fill your awareness, so you assume they fill other people's awareness too. But that's rarely the case. People aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are. They're thinking about themselves, wondering if their shirt is wrinkled or if they said the wrong thing 5 minutes ago. Take the example of public speaking. Someone stands in front of a group to give a short talk. They stumble on a word. Their face feels hot. They assume the whole room noticed. Maybe someone did, but most were half listening, checking their phones, or lost in thought. A few might not have even realized there was a mistake. The speaker, though, might carry that slip with them all day. The same thing happens with appearance. You get a haircut that feels too short. You think everyone will comment or stare, but most people don't even register the change. They're thinking about their own morning, their to-do list, or how tired they feel. Even when people do notice, they rarely attach judgment to it. And even if they do judge, they forget about it quickly. People have short memories for other people's mistakes. Social media adds to this pressure. When you post something, you might spend time wondering how people will react. Did it get enough likes? Did someone take it the wrong way? But most people scroll quickly. They see dozens of posts in a few minutes. Yours might get a moment of attention, then it's gone. The spotlight you feel, where every word or image seems heavy, exists mostly in your head. In conversations, the spotlight effect can make you second-guess everything. You say something that lands a little off. You think, that was awkward. You replay it later, certain the other person is still thinking about it. But they likely forgot it completely, or they noticed and didn't care. Everyone has awkward moments, but yours feel bigger to you because you're the one who experienced them directly. This effect isn't limited to embarrassing moments. It also shows up when you try something new. You walk into the gym for the first time and feel like everyone's watching. You think they're judging your form or your clothes, but most people are focused on their own workout. They're not scanning the room for newcomers. If they do notice you, it's usually a passing glance. Understanding the spotlight effect helps you act more freely. When you realize that people aren't watching you closely, you can move with less hesitation. You can speak without rehearsing every word. You can wear what you like without wondering if it looks right to others. You can make a mistake without assuming it ruined anyone's opinion of you. This doesn't mean people never notice anything. Sometimes they do, but they rarely dwell on it. They're not keeping a record of your missteps. They're not giving you the attention you imagine. And that's a good thing. It means you're free to be human. You can mess up, be quiet, say the wrong thing, and still be fine. You also start to see that the same rule applies to others. You realize that most people aren't trying to impress you. They're hoping they don't mess up in front of you. They're not cold or standoffish. They're shy, distracted, or nervous. When you see that, social pressure softens. You stop judging yourself and others so harshly. You start making room for imperfection. Teachers see this with students. A student might be terrified to ask a question, worried that the class will think they're slow. But when they do ask, others nod. They had the same question. They just didn't want to be the one to ask. The spotlight that felt so intense was never real. It was just fear, magnified by attention turned inward. In the workplace, someone might stay silent in a meeting out of fear of sounding wrong. They think, if I speak and it doesn't land, I'll look bad. But most people in the room are wondering if they should speak too, or they're focused on their own ideas. The silence isn't protecting them. It's reinforcing the belief that only perfect contributions are worth making. But people remember consistent effort more than small mistakes. Parents often experience the spotlight effect when out in public with their kids. A child cries in the store. The parent feels every glance. They assume people are judging their parenting. But most shoppers either sympathize or tune it out. The parent feels exposed, but others are just trying to finish their errands. Their focus isn't as sharp or critical as the parent thinks. Letting go of the spotlight effect doesn't mean becoming careless. It means realizing that self-consciousness exaggerates judgment. It tells you a story where you are always center stage, always under review. But in truth, you are one of many in the crowd, noticed sometimes, but not watched with a magnifying glass. You can test this yourself. Try wearing something unusual, not extreme, just different from your norm. Track how many people actually react. Most won't. Try saying something slightly awkward and watch what happens. Usually, nothing. If someone notices, they move on. That's not proof you don't matter. It's proof that you have space to grow. Experiment and show up as yourself without fear of constant scrutiny. The spotlight effect is an illusion built from your own attention. The moment you turn that attention outward, toward others, toward your surroundings, toward the task in front of you, the light dims. You stop imagining the crowd. You return to the present, and in that space, you start to feel free again. A person scrolls through their feed and sees post after post that reflects their beliefs. Every comment, every article, every video tells them they're right. They feel understood, maybe even validated. There's comfort in knowing others agree. But slowly, that comfort turns into something else. New ideas feel threatening. People who think differently seem not just wrong, but dangerous. This is the echo chamber paradox. The more someone seeks agreement for peace of mind, the more they risk becoming mentally rigid and socially isolated. People naturally want to feel seen and supported. It's easier to relax around those who nod along than around those who push back. That makes echo chambers appealing. They offer relief from conflict. They shield you from the discomfort of doubt. But the cost of that comfort is growth. When you only hear what you already believe, you stop learning, you stop questioning, and without challenge, your thinking begins to shrink. An echo chamber doesn't have to be a physical space. It can be a group of friends who all share the same views, a news source that reinforces your stance, or a set of online algorithms designed to show you more of what you like. Over time, these filters narrow your exposure. You start to believe your view is the obvious one. If others disagree, they must be misinformed, biased, or acting in bad faith. This mindset doesn't just affect opinions. It changes how you interpret facts. You may downplay or dismiss data that challenges your perspective. You may accept weak evidence that supports your side because it feels familiar. Your thinking becomes less about seeking truth and more about defending a position. Take a group that believes one political idea. Within that group, the same claims get repeated so often, they start to feel like facts. Members reward each other for saying the right things. Anyone who asks a hard question risks being pushed out. Even if someone sees a flaw, they stay silent to keep the peace. That silence signals agreement, which strengthens the illusion of unity. Over time, doubt becomes taboo. Outside voices feel more distant. If a different view appears, the group rejects it immediately. They don't ask, could this be true? They ask, how do we defend ourselves from this? Disagreement becomes a threat, not a chance to understand. That shift deepens the divide between groups. Each side sees the other as not just mistaken, but dangerous or broken. The echo chamber also changes language. Words get loaded with emotional meaning. A term that used to describe a policy now signals loyalty or betrayal. Phrases lose nuance and turn into slogans. This makes conversation across lines harder. People stop listening for meaning and start listening for signs of opposition. Even in less charged topics, echo chambers form. In the workplace, teams can fall into groupthink. Everyone agrees in meetings because it feels easier. Disagreement might slow the project or cause tension. But without that friction, bad ideas go unchallenged. The team avoids short-term discomfort, but risks long-term failure. Intellectual stagnation often hides behind politeness. People smile and nod, but say nothing real. They want to avoid debate, so they keep ideas to themselves. This creates a surface of agreement that hides deeper difference. When conflict eventually surfaces, it feels bigger than it is, because it was buried too long. Breaking out of an echo chamber doesn't mean inviting conflict for its own sake. It means making room for disagreement without fear. It means asking, what am I missing? Instead of, how do I prove I'm right? It means talking to people who think differently, not to change them, but to understand them. This takes effort. It means listening without interrupting. It means sitting with the discomfort of not having a quick reply. It means admitting when you don't know. That humility builds stronger thinking. It shows you where your beliefs are solid and where they need work. One way to do this is to seek out disagreement in small doses. Read something you don't fully agree with. Ask someone how they came to a view you don't share. Don't debate, just ask. When someone says something that feels wrong, resist the urge to shut down. Ask why it makes sense to them. Their answer may surprise you. It also helps to test your own beliefs. Try to explain your view to someone who doesn't share it. If you struggle, that's not failure. It's a sign you're still learning. Strong ideas survive pressure. Weak ones crack. But you only find out which is which when you let them be tested. The goal isn't to agree with everyone. That's not realistic. And it's not the point. The goal is to stay open enough to keep learning. That means letting go of the need for constant reassurance. It means replacing the desire to be right with the desire to see clearly. Some worry that openness will make them lose their values. But being curious doesn't mean being aimless. You can hold your principles while still asking hard questions. In fact, real confidence comes from knowing you've tested your views and chosen them, not inherited them unexamined. Echo chambers thrive on fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of standing out, fear of losing your group. But those fears shrink when you face them. When you step outside the chamber and find that disagreement doesn't destroy you, you gain freedom. You stop needing agreement to feel secure. You start trusting your ability to think, to learn, and to grow. You also gain connection. When people see you're willing to listen, they listen back. That doesn't always lead to agreement, but it opens a door. And sometimes that's enough to break the illusion that we're all divided into fixed camps, each beyond reach. The paradox is simple. Seeking agreement feels safe, but it narrows your mind. Seeking understanding feels risky, but it expands your thinking. The more you surround yourself with sameness, the less you grow. And the less you grow, the more threatened you feel by difference. To break that cycle, you have to do something hard. Step outside the familiar and stay open to what you find. Not to change sides, but to see more clearly where you stand. You open your phone and see someone your age launching a business, running a marathon, or vacationing somewhere you've only dreamed of. You feel a jolt. Not envy exactly, but a sense that you're behind. You start thinking about what you've done lately, how it stacks up, whether you're working hard enough or making the right choices. You tell yourself this comparison will push you to do more, but instead you feel small, tired, or stuck. This is the social comparison paradox. Looking at others for motivation often leads to discouragement instead of drive. Comparison is part of how people understand themselves. From a young age, we watch what others do to figure out what's normal, what's impressive, and what's possible. In theory, seeing someone succeed should be inspiring. If they can do it, maybe you can too. But in practice, it rarely works that way. What starts as curiosity becomes pressure. A gap between where you are and where they are turns into self-criticism. One reason is selective exposure. You don't see the full picture, only the highlight reel. Social media shows people at their best, smiling, succeeding, winning. You don't see the part where they doubted themselves, failed 3 times, or cried in the car. You compare your messy middle to their polished outcome. It's not a fair comparison, but it feels real in the moment. This shows up in school settings. A student sees another getting high grades or praise from a teacher. Instead of asking, what did they do to get there? They think, why am I not like that? The focus shifts from learning to measuring. Instead of growing, the student feels behind. The comparison becomes a weight, not a ladder. In work environments, employees compare salaries, promotions, or recognition. One person's success feels like another's failure. Even in jobs with plenty of room to grow, people feel like they're in a race. The goal becomes beating someone else rather than improving yourself. That pressure leads to burnout, resentment, or quitting, not better performance. This happens with personal goals too. Someone sees a friend getting in shape, and instead of being inspired, they feel shame. They try to copy the routine exactly without thinking about their own needs or limits. When it doesn't work right away, they feel worse. The comparison made them act, but not in a way that fits their life. The paradox deepens when you succeed but still feel behind. You hit a goal, lose the weight, get the job, finish the degree, but someone else is already doing the next thing. You don't get to feel proud, you get to feel late. The goalposts move every time you look around. Satisfaction becomes a moving target. Comparison also makes people hide. If you think you're behind, you're less likely to share what you're working on. You don't want to look small. You don't ask for help because you assume everyone else has it figured out. But they don't. They're comparing themselves too. Everyone is watching everyone else and thinking they're the only one who's unsure. Some people try to escape this by avoiding social media or staying in their lane. That helps a little, but comparison still finds a way in. It happens through conversations, updates, even casual mentions. Someone says, "Did you hear what she's doing now?" And the old feeling returns. Not because you're unhappy for them, but because you feel unsure about yourself. The trouble is not just the act of comparing, it's what you tell yourself after. You see someone thriving and think, "They're better than me," or "I'm falling behind." That story drains you. But there's another way to respond. You can ask, what does their path show me about mine? Not, why aren't I them? But what does this bring up for me? Some comparisons are useful. They show you what's possible. They reveal what you value. If someone's success triggers something in you, it might be pointing to a goal you haven't named yet. But to use comparison well, you have to stay grounded. You have to know what matters to you, not just what looks impressive. It helps to look at your own progress more than at other people's outcomes. Think in terms of better than before, not better than them. Keep track of your small wins, write them down. Celebrate them even if no one else sees them. That builds real confidence, confidence based on growth, not competition. You can also shift who you compare yourself to. Instead of focusing on people at the finish line, notice those who are just one step ahead. Ask them what helped. Learn from their process. They're close enough to remember what your spot felt like. Their advice will likely be more honest and helpful than advice from someone who's far ahead. Another shift is noticing what comparison costs. Every time you spend energy measuring yourself against someone else, you lose focus on your own work. You trade clarity for doubt. You can't build well while watching someone else's blueprint. You have to build your own, based on your goals, values, and pace. Comparison also hides your strengths. You might be calm in crisis, but you compare yourself to someone who speaks with charm. You think you're behind, but they might wish they had your patience. The more you look outward, the less you see what's unique about you. Some people think that without comparison, they won't stay motivated. But most growth comes from internal drive, from setting goals that matter to you, even if no one claps, from doing the work because you believe in it, not because it makes you look good. That kind of motivation lasts. It's not shaken every time someone else moves faster. You're not meant to be a copy of someone else. You're meant to find your own way. That path won't always be fast or shiny, but it will be yours. The only fair comparison is between who you were and who you're becoming. Everything else is noise. The paradox is clear. Looking to others for motivation often leaves you feeling worse. The more you chase their pace, the more you lose sight of your own. Real growth doesn't come from watching others move. It comes from moving, even slowly, on your own terms. Someone wakes up and checks their to-do list before getting out of bed. They've read enough about high performance to know they should start strong. They open a productivity app, count the tasks they need to finish, then check a calendar full of colored blocks. By the time they sit down to work, they already feel behind. They haven't done anything yet, but the pressure is high. This is the productivity trap. When trying to be as efficient as possible ends up making you feel overwhelmed, scattered, and tired. Productivity in theory is about making good use of time, but in practice, it often becomes about control. People try to squeeze every hour, every minute, every moment into something useful. They track their habits, count their steps, block their time, and optimize their workflow. But instead of feeling in control, they feel like they're being controlled. Every pause feels like failure. Every slow day feels like falling behind. Part of the problem is how productivity gets defined. It's not just about doing what matters. It becomes about doing more. More work, more goals, more hustle. If you finish your list, the next step is to make a longer one. If you hit a goal, you're expected to raise the bar. There's no end point, no real rest, only the next thing. This turns effort into anxiety. People measure their value by output. If they aren't constantly producing, they feel guilty. Even rest becomes something to manage. You don't just relax, you schedule downtime. You don't just read, you track your pages and minutes. Relaxation becomes another task. The result is burnout disguised as discipline. Someone may look focused from the outside. They show up early, meet deadlines, and never miss a task. But inside, they're worn down. They never feel done. Their brain keeps spinning long after work hours. They struggle to enjoy the results of their work because they're already worried about the next deadline. The obsession with productivity also kills creativity. When every task has to lead to a clear result, there's no room for exploration. Some ideas need space. Some problems need time. But a mind trained to see every pause as waste won't allow that space. It rushes to complete, to solve, to ship. That works for short tasks, but not for deep thinking. It also damages focus. People jump between timers, techniques, and tools, trying to find the perfect system. They switch apps, tweak routines, and follow hacks that promise better results. But the constant switching creates friction. Instead of doing the work, they end up working on how to work. Productivity becomes its own full-time job. Some fall into comparison. They watch videos of people with color-coded calendars, neatly stacked routines, and flawless mornings. They try to copy it, thinking that will fix the chaos in their own life. But someone else's system rarely fits your life exactly. What looks smooth from the outside may not even work well for the person using it. In some workplaces, the trap becomes cultural. Meetings end with action steps, deadlines multiply, and responsiveness is treated like commitment. If you answer an email at midnight, you're seen as engaged. If you turn off notifications, you're seen as checked out. The pressure builds until rest feels unsafe. The only way to be seen as dedicated is to stay on all the time. Even people who work for themselves fall into this. They wanted freedom, but ended up creating tighter schedules than any boss ever gave them. They track their hours, count their followers, and turn hobbies into side hustles. They tell themselves it's for progress, but often it's fear. Fear of being seen as lazy. Fear of not making it. Fear of missing their moment. There's nothing wrong with being organized or setting goals. But when the structure takes over your sense of self, it stops being helpful. You start believing that your worth is tied to how efficient you are. You lose the ability to slow down without guilt. And over time, that makes you less effective, not more. Real productivity is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters in a way that's sustainable. That means leaving room for rest, curiosity, and time that doesn't need to justify itself. It means knowing when to stop, not just how to start. It means accepting that some days will be slow and that slowness is not failure. You can't measure a day only by what you checked off a list. Some of the most important work you do, like thinking through a tough problem, connecting with someone, or sitting with uncertainty, won't show up in a spreadsheet. But that work counts. It shapes your thinking. It builds your resilience. It prepares you for the next task in ways a timer can't. The productivity trap tells you to always push. But sometimes, the best thing you can do is pause. Not as a tactic, not to recover for more work, but because you need to be a person, not a machine. Productivity is a tool, not a value system. When it becomes the lens through which you view everything, You stop asking the most important question: why am I doing this? Once you step back, you can start to reset. You can keep the structure that supports you and let go of the parts that drain you. You can choose which tools help and which ones distract. You can define productivity on your own terms, by meaning, not just motion. A healthy relationship with work allows for rhythm. Some days you move fast, some days you don't. Some weeks are full, others are quiet. That variety isn't failure, it's balance. It's what keeps you going without losing yourself in the process. The paradox is clear. When you obsess over productivity, you become less productive. You lose sight of what matters and get trapped in the idea of output. But when you step back, slow down, and choose with care, you get more done, and you feel better doing it. Not because you're pushing harder, but because you're moving with purpose, not pressure. A person starts learning about a subject and feels confident quickly. The basics make sense. A few terms fall into place. They can explain the main points in a conversation and feel like they understand it. But then they go deeper. They read more, talk to others with experience, and start to notice gaps. New questions come up, questions they can't answer. Concepts they thought were simple begin to show layers. The more they learn, the more aware they become of what they don't know. This is the knowledge paradox. Gaining knowledge doesn't just reveal answers. It reveals how many answers you still don't have. In the beginning, ignorance feels clean. You either know something or you don't. A simple answer is enough, but real knowledge is rarely simple. It comes with uncertainty, exceptions, and gray areas. You stop saying always and start saying often. You replace "that's right" with "that depends." This shift doesn't mean you're less informed. It means your thinking is more accurate, but it can feel like you're moving backward, like the more you know, the less you understand. This pattern shows up in every field. A first-year medical student may speak with confidence about the body. They've memorized terms and diagrams. Everything seems organized and logical. But a seasoned doctor speaks differently. They use fewer absolutes. They mention patient variability and edge cases. They know where the science ends and the guesswork begins. Their caution isn't weakness, it's depth. In history, someone might learn a few key events and feel like they understand a period. But once they study original documents, opposing accounts, and broader context, the narrative starts to blur. The timeline no longer tells one story, it tells many. A historian stops saying what happened and starts asking why different people say it happened in different ways. In science, beginners look for answers. Experts look for better questions. A physics student might explain how gravity works with clean math, but a physicist might say, we still don't fully understand how gravity fits with quantum mechanics. The surface-level knowledge creates clarity. The deeper knowledge reveals conflict. This paradox can be uncomfortable. It challenges the idea that learning is a straight path towards certainty. Instead, it's a loop. You start out not knowing. Then you know a little and feel sure. Then you learn more and feel unsure. With time, you develop quiet confidence, not because you know everything, but because you've learned to live with what you don't. One reason this happens is because early learning often hides complexity. A beginner's overview is meant to simplify. That's helpful at first. You need structure, but the real subject doesn't live in the overview. It lives in the details, in the contradictions, in the parts that don't fit. As you study those details, the edges of your knowledge become clearer. You stop seeing a complete picture and start seeing the parts that are still missing. The more you read, the more you realize how much you haven't read. The more you talk to others in your field, the more you realize how much they've seen that you haven't. This isn't failure, it's perspective. A small map looks complete until you see a larger one. Then you realize your map was just a corner of the whole. This shift also changes how you interact with others. People who have learned deeply tend to speak more carefully. They qualify their statements. They ask more questions than they answer. They listen longer, not because they're unsure, but because they respect the complexity of what they're discussing. Meanwhile, someone new to the topic may speak with more confidence, unaware of how limited their view still is. This can create confusion in public debates. The loudest voices often belong to people with shallow knowledge. They offer certainty. They make bold claims. That can be persuasive, but it's also misleading. Deep knowledge rarely sounds that simple. It sounds thoughtful. It sounds like someone who's been wrong before and expects to be wrong again. The knowledge paradox also teaches humility. The more you learn, the more you realize how much others might know that you don't. You stop assuming your way is the only way. You begin to value other views, not because all views are equal, but because you see that your own is incomplete. This humility opens the door to better thinking. You become willing to revise your ideas when you learn something new. It also changes how you define expertise. An expert is not someone who has all the answers. An expert is someone who knows the questions better than most. They know which problems are old and unsolved. They know which answers are controversial. They know what evidence is missing. Their expertise is not about being done. It's about being aware. This kind of learning doesn't always feel good. It can create doubt, hesitation, even impostor syndrome. You feel like the more you know, the less certain you are. That feeling is common among people who've spent real time with a subject. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you've stopped mistaking simplicity for understanding. The good news is that this shift also leads to deeper confidence. Not the kind that says, I know everything, but the kind that says, I've seen enough to know how much I haven't seen. That confidence is steadier. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't collapse under pressure. It's built on curiosity, not control. The knowledge paradox doesn't go away. It deepens. Every time you learn more, you reveal another layer of what you haven't touched. But this doesn't mean learning is hopeless. It means learning is alive. There is always more to ask, more to explore, more to notice. And the more you learn, the better your questions become. You stop looking for a final answer and start building a better conversation. A person joins a new team. They hold back in the first meeting, not because they don't care, but because they don't want to seem naive or make the wrong call. They wait for someone else to go first. Others in the room are doing the same. No one wants to speak until they're sure they'll be received well. But the room stays quiet. Each person is waiting for a signal that never comes. This is the trust paradox. Trust feels like something you should wait for. But it often only shows up after you take the first step to offer it. Most people want trust in their relationships, work, and communities. They want others to be honest, to follow through, to show loyalty. But at the same time, they don't want to risk being hurt, let down, or exposed. So they hesitate. They build walls, set tests, and look for proof. They say, I'll trust them once they earn it. But trust doesn't work that way. It rarely arrives fully formed. It grows, slowly and unevenly, from small acts of openness. Giving trust before you feel secure seems backward, but someone has to start. If everyone waits, no one moves. If no one moves, nothing builds. Trust becomes a standoff. Each person waits for evidence that the other is safe. But in many cases, the only way to create that safety is to risk a little trust first. This doesn't mean throwing caution aside. It means offering trust in small, deliberate ways, in conversation. It might mean admitting you don't know something or sharing a concern. At work, it might mean asking someone for help or letting them lead a task without hovering. In friendships, it could mean showing emotion before you're sure how they'll respond. These small risks often invite others to do the same. When someone senses that you trust them, they often step up. They want to match what you've offered. Not always, but often enough to make it worth trying. That first show of faith gives them space to be more honest, more present, or more invested. The room changes. The relationship shifts. There's a reason this feels risky. Trust can be broken. When it is, the hurt runs deep. People remember times they opened up and were ignored, mocked, or betrayed, so they protect themselves. They avoid the kind of exposure that led to pain. That makes sense, but over time, the defense becomes a prison. You end up alone inside your own caution. In some cases, people build systems around distrust. Managers micromanage because they don't trust employees to work without oversight. Partners test each other instead of talking openly. Friends keep things light to avoid emotional risk. These habits feel safe in the short term, but in the long run, they create distance. People sense when they're not trusted, and when they sense that, they often withdraw. Trust also gets tangled with control. When you don't trust someone, you try to manage them. You monitor, correct, or pull away. That can look like leadership or responsibility, but it's really fear. True trust lets go. It allows space for someone to act freely. That space is where respect grows. In close relationships, trust builds over time, but only if it's given space to show up. You can't analyze your way into trust. You have to try it. You share something real and see how the other person holds it. If they respect it, you share more. If they mishandle it, you learn something. Either way, you move forward with more clarity. The paradox becomes clear in new relationships. Two people may like each other, but both hesitate. They avoid being the one who texts first, brings up something serious, or shows strong emotion. No one wants to be too much, but all that restraint can look like distance. Both people feel unsure, both wait, nothing deepens. In team settings, the same pattern repeats. A leader who doesn't trust the team creates a tight grip. People feel watched, not supported. They play it safe and stop thinking creatively. But a leader who says, "I believe you can handle this," creates a very different space. That trust might be unearned at first, but it invites people to rise to the moment. Not all trust works out. Some people will misuse it. That's part of the risk. But the answer isn't to stop trusting altogether. It's to trust more carefully, not less completely. You learn to trust in layers, not all at once. You give enough to see who someone is, then decide what the next layer might look like. This approach also helps in conflict. If two people argue, it's easy to fall into blame. But if one person says, "Here's where I think I messed up," or "I want to understand your side better," the tension often softens. They're not giving in, they're offering trust that the conversation can go somewhere better. That small act can shift the whole dynamic. Even in systems like healthcare, education, or law, the presence or absence of trust changes outcomes. Patients who trust their doctors follow treatment plans. Students who trust their teachers engage more. Citizens who trust institutions are more likely to follow rules. Trust is not a soft concept. It has real effects. It's also contagious. When someone sees trust being offered, they're more likely to do the same. A workplace where trust is the norm feels different from one where everyone guards themselves. You can feel it in how people talk, how freely they share ideas, and how they handle mistakes. Giving trust doesn't mean expecting perfection. People will make errors. That's part of any human connection. What matters is how those moments are handled. Do they take responsibility? Do they try to repair the damage? Do they care? Trust deepens when people show they can be counted on. Even when things go wrong, there's no formula, but the pattern is clear. The people who build strong relationships, healthy teams, and real connections are usually the ones willing to go first. They don't wait to feel completely safe. They make space for trust to grow by offering it first. That offer is the risk, and it's often the reason trust ever happens at all.